and Bob will let us know when he's ready for us to start.
Yeah.
We are live.
Okay, and do you want to hand it back to me?
Yep.
And then I'll begin recording. Oh, great. Commissioner Woolley.
Yay. Okay.
Okay, and okay, Mary.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Wall, the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission Chair, and I'll call the June 12th, 2020 meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for being here and welcome. As a first item, we're going to have Kristen Wright give us some logistics for the Zoom meeting.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Kristen Wright. I work for the National Policy Consensus Center at Portland State University. Today I'm here to provide technical support to the Commission and the ODF&W staff to be able to hold this Commission meeting virtually through Zoom. We're glad you're here and on the YouTube stream, and we appreciate your patience as we adapt to this new virtual world. Just a few things to orient you to the Zoom meeting platform. First, only commissioners and presenting staff will be visible on the screen. To help with communication and meeting management, we ask that commissioners and participating staff please keep yourself muted to limit background noise. Your mute button is located at the bottom left hand of your screen, and we ask that you wait until you're recognized by the chair before unmuting yourself to speak. Second, please use the digital hand raise feature to signal if you have a question or comment and wait to be recognized by the chair. You can find this feature by clicking on the participants logo at the bottom of your screen, and this will open a list of meeting participants to your right. At the bottom of the list of participants, you will see a raised hand icon. You may need to expand your screen to be able to see that icon. I will be tracking raised hands, and at the appropriate time, we'll notify the chair. Lastly, we do have the chat feature available to participants and commissioners, but as it can be distracting to meeting participants, we ask that you limit your use of chat in the meeting. And please also understand that chat will be saved as part of the public record. If you are a non-participating attendee, that is, you will not be visible on the screen. You will not be able to mute or unmute yourself, but you will be able to use the raise hand feature, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. Some of the observing attendees may be asked to participate in the meeting, and at that time, I will announce that I'm switching your role from an observing attendee to a participant. There will be a small blip on your screen, and then you will be able to unmute yourself to speak. Your video will also be live at that time. Once your participation is complete, you will be moved back to an observing attendee status. Lastly, our backup contingency plan, if there are technical issues, is that I will end the meeting and restart it. So you will need to log back in using the Zoom link you used to enter this meeting now. In the event of an inappropriate disruption, I will first try to remove the person from the meeting before rebooting the meeting. Again, we're really glad to have you with us today. And with that, I will hand it back to Chair Wall.
Thank you, Kristen. Good morning again, everyone. I'd like to mention a few of the ways that we're going to run this meeting this morning and this afternoon, just so people know and can maybe plan your day a little bit. In the morning, everything that's on the agenda, we will try to get through except the fur bearer item, which is Exhibit E. So we will try to do all of the items on the agenda, including talk about the budget in the morning. And then we will have an hour and a half break for lunch. We would like to do that from 12 to 1:30. And at 1:30, we will go back to the fur bearer item and we'll have testimony at 1:30 from at least a few of the people. And then if we have not yet had the fur bearer presentation by staff, we will also do that at 1:30. We just so you know, we will try to, if there is time, we will do the fur bearer staff presentation just before lunch. Probably it will happen at 1:30 in that when we do, so we will then be devoting the entire afternoon to fur bearer. And I will let you know that there are a lot of people signed up, so we will be limiting people's time for testimony on the fur bearer item. So with that, I'd like to let each of the commissioners introduce themselves, just maybe tell your name and the town you're from, and then we'll go right to the director's report. So let's start east to west. Commissioner Hatfield Hyde.
Good morning, I'm Becky Hatfield Hyde, and I am from Paisley, Oregon, and also Brothers and Beatty.
Commissioner Labhart.
Good morning, everybody, and those online. My name is Mark Labhart, and I have the privilege of living in Sisters, Oregon.
Thank you. Commissioner Zarnowitz.
Yes, I'm Jill Zarnowitz, and I live near the town of Yamhill.
Commissioner Spellbrink, thank you.
Bob Spellbrink, Siletz, Oregon.
And Commissioner Woolley. Commissioner Woolley, are you
Sorry,
there?
I'm muted. Good morning. This is Greg Woolley. I'm from the Portland metro area.
Thank you. Thank you all. Then let's go right to the director's report and start through the morning items. Commissioner or Director Melcher.
Well, thank you, Chair Wall, and good morning. We do, as you mentioned, have a very full agenda, so we really appreciate everyone's time and sticking with us here. We did present or provide field reports to you in written form, and so we won't go over those orally here today. First up, under the director's report, I'd like to call on Deputy Director for Administration, Erica Kleiner, to give us the expenditure report.
All right. Good morning, Chair Wall and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Erica Kleiner, Deputy Director for Administration. You do have a written copy of the financial report. Data in that report is reflected through the end of April. So I'm going to start off today with some comments on revenue. So for other funds, revenue has picked up significantly since I last provided a financial report in April. So just for some context, we started off the year really strong. Both January and February were strong license sales months. In fact, February was 60% over February of 2019. We went into March really strong as well. And the first 2 weeks were really healthy revenue numbers. However, we experienced a sudden but short-term revenue deceleration over the last 2 weeks of March. And that was directly related to the COVID-19 situation. A lot of people weren't comfortable with travel at that time. The good news is we rebounded really quickly. So April, we were 4% overall for revenue for other funds license. And that's compared to April of 2019. In May, we were 19% over where we were in May of 2019. So good, healthy numbers. June looks strong so far. We're 12% over where we were in June of 2019. Not exactly apples to apples for June, because last year we had 2 weekends up to this date. And this year, obviously, we've only had one, but doing really well there. So on the other end of the spectrum, we have general fund and our lottery funds, and that outlook is not good. So the recent May economic and revenue forecast reflected a $2.7 billion general fund shortfall statewide. And when we bring in the next biennium, 2021-23, that's up to a $5 billion shortfall. So there is still some uncertainty out there on how federal stimulus monies and the state reserve funds will offset any reductions. We do expect there to be a special session, but I don't have a date at this point. It's only speculative, but we may see a special session later in June or in July. And then finally, with lottery funds, this is one area we knew very early on with the COVID-19 situation. People weren't engaging, and so we knew we had to prepare for some reductions there. We've done that, and we've already taken action such as leaving lottery-funded positions vacant, not hiring seasonals, reducing our services and supply spending to meet those reductions. For federal funds, the Pittman-Robertson outlook looks very, very good. So sales of guns and ammunition have risen significantly over the last several, and that's also related. And as you know, we receive a portion of the federal excise taxes down over the last year, but not significantly. So we've had upward trends again with license sales, with boat registrations and fuel. For expenditures, expenditures through the month of April remain below revenue. So we're doing really well with expenditures. That's related to the fact that we're being really conservative when it comes to spending. And we do have a agency-wide hiring freeze spending to align with any declines in revenue. So next, our unrestricted cash balance currently just over into where we were in June of 2019. So we've saw that come down a bit. So next, I want to highlight where we're at with 2021-23 budget development. Later, we'll talk about budget leading into overall our EBAC, our External Budget Advisory Committee process, kind of inherent challenges in not being able to meet with our stakeholders in person. So the positive here is that we did receive a substantial amount of feedback through that process on our budget, more feedback than we have in the past, actually. We did respond to all of our stakeholders that submitted comments through that process at the end of May. We did that in writing. And I just wanted to acknowledge that we do appreciate all of the stakeholders that engaged with us in that alternative process. So finally, audit updates. You do have a couple kind of technical audit updates in the written report, but I wanted to mention and bring attention to a development. I'd like to share the departure of our internal auditor, Michael Campbell. So Michael has a really good opportunity with the Department of Consumer and Business Services. So he's going to be going 16th. And I just wanted to publicly acknowledge Michael's contributions to ODFW and thank him for that. And the next view commission. So that concludes my my report, and I'd welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. I'd like to mention, and I said this a few days ago, but I'd like to say it again, and that is that for an agency to be in a strong financial position and have the financial administration be so effective is good in any time. It's especially good in downtimes or uncertain times. And so kudos to you, to Brandy Nichols, to Director Melcher for the condition this department is in. And thank you. Commissioners, questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Erica, and back to you, Director Melcher.
Well, thank you, Chair Wall, and thanks, Erica. I did, as you all know, we've been involved in a big game regulation review process for the last several years, really trying to simplify our regulations, but also ground them in the status of the resource. And so I wanted to have Nick Myatt, and Nick, I think, is coming in from LeGrand today, or maybe Baker City, give you an update on that process. So hopefully Nick's on. I haven't seen him yet.
Yep, I'm here.
Very good. Thanks, Nick. Go ahead.
All right, I believe should see my presentation now, correct?
Yes.
All right. Good morning. Chair Wall, Commissioners, Nick Myatt. I am leading our efforts for the big game hunting review to improve Oregon's big game hunting regulations. And as Kurt mentioned, I'm zooming to you today from Baker City, Oregon. So today wanted to provide a refresher on the goals of our project since we started this 2 years ago. Wanted to provide an update on the outcome of the online public forum that we recently completed, and want to then move into update on the recent deer and elk hunter opinion survey that was completed this week, actually. And then spend most of my time on an overview of proposals that the department is considering for 2021 hunting seasons. And then end with letting you know about some of the extensive outreach and opportunity for input that we have planned this summer. So just a quick review of the project goals. When we started, we set 4 goals. First is to improve customer service through simpler big game hunting seasons and associated regulations. The second is to allocate hunting opportunity fairly and consistent with hunter preferences. The third is to promote or to review our hunting season structure and allocation of opportunity to promote hunter recruitment, retention, and reactivation. And then finally, the fourth is to ensure that our hunting seasons continue to meet biological objectives and where we can strive to maintain or improve hunter opportunity. I always do make sure to acknowledge that sometimes it can be difficult to meet all of these goals at the same time, and they can conflict with each other occasionally. So with the unexpected events related to COVID this spring, we reassessed our project and the issues that we're working on. And we've made some adjustments and will now just be focusing on 2 of our highest priority issues. And these are the timing of West Cascade deer and elk season and our approach to Eastern Oregon deer and elk archery seasons. Selection of these issues as our priorities were based on, those were the 2 issues that received the most comments and interest on the online forum, but also the department's having some management challenges with those seasons as well. And then with COVID safety measures in place, we will also be shifting much of our public outreach and information to online resources. Which is something that we've talked about prior to even knowing what COVID was. And we're excited to use a new approach and some new methods, and think we can reach a larger audience with our information and a more diverse audience than we've been able to reach in the past. So last year during our process, we received feedback from some hunters and the organized hunting groups that they really wanted an opportunity to be able to provide input prior to the department developing proposed changes. So based on that feedback, we contracted Responsive Management to launch an online public forum that was live for a 30-day time period in February. And did a lot of outreach directing the public to that site and asking for as much feedback as we could get. We were excited. We received nearly 1,400 comments that were made by just under 10,000 unique visitors to the website. This was the first time that we used this method. It was a beneficial tool and a pretty positive experience for us. We were very thankful that hunters spent a lot of time submitting very detailed, thoughtful comments on the forum. We did receive, while the forum was live, we did receive some positive feedback from hunters about the forum and the opportunity to comment using that method. We have received some a little bit of negative feedback since then from hunters about how concerned about how we're going to use the information on the forum, and I think concerned that some of the views that were expressed might not meet their own personal views, and concerned that there's maybe some potential bias in the comments that were submitted on the forum. And I've just been reminding hunters why we used the forum, and it's just one tool that we're using to collect input. And we really are look to use the forum as an opportunity to get that early input, to listen for new ideas that we had not considered, to test the waters on some ideas that we had, and to really just hear what issues are important to Oregon's hunters. We do need to be aware of potential biases with the method of an online forum, and that's why we'll not be using that information in a quantitative way, and that's really the purpose of the follow-up hunter opinion survey. So responsive management is developing a summary of all of the comments that were submitted on the forum. And we expect that to be available for the public in the next few weeks, and we'll also provide that to the commission. So throughout this project, we have prioritized collecting statistically valid, unbiased information to better understand the opinions and preferences of Oregon's resident deer and elk hunters. And as I mentioned, this week we completed the latest survey. We were originally targeting 2,000 hunters for our sample size, but with everyone being, or a lot of people being at home and off of work due to the COVID situation, we had a much higher than expected sample and response rate, and we're able to complete more than 4,000 surveys. So it's pretty exciting to see the level of detail we're going to be able to do our analysis in. This year's survey did focus on really informing specific changes that the department is considering proposing for next year's hunting seasons. And again, with the online public forum and this survey, a report will be available here real soon for the public. We'll provide that to the commission, and I'm also hoping to look for an opportunity for Mark Duda with responsive management to present to the commission, again, the results similar to what he did last September. So now I wanted to outline the proposals that we are considering making for the 2021 hunting seasons. And when I say proposals we're considering making, I mean that these are draft proposals that we have developed internally, and we want to collect input from hunters over the summer and look at our survey results, and we'll use that input to inform the final proposals that we develop and bring forward to the commission in September. In the first issue, priority issue that wanted to address is the timing of general deer and elk seasons in the West Cascades. Decades ago, there were multiple Cascade elk seasons that were later in the fall and longer in duration than they are now. The season was moved from the later half of November to the mid-October timeframe due to challenges that we were having with maintaining bull ratios. And this led to a less desirable time of year for hunting and a much shorter season than there was in the past. This also caused a 7-day break in the Cascade buck deer season, which created inconsistent season dates between the Cascades portion of Western Oregon and the coastal portion of Western Oregon. And the Cascade elk season used to be pretty popular with hunters, but over time participation has really declined, and hunter success rate is very low, often being 5% or lower success rate in recent years. And at the same time that this change has taken place, there has been a significant change in public land habitat conditions and elk populations. And because of that, we think there is an opportunity to provide a better hunting experience for our customer, as well as make our regulations simpler. Our technical difficulties here. There we go. There's two options that we're considering proposing. First is to move the West Cascade elk season to early November. It would have the same 7-day season length, but would start the Saturday immediately after the general deer season. The season would overlap with the youth 2-day deer season, which we think is a great thing. We heard in our survey last year that families want to hunt together more than they want youth to just hunt in their separate seasons. So this would provide an opportunity for families to hunt together and only have to travel up into the forest to go hunting one time instead of twice if they would like. An alternative approach that was suggested by hunters on the online forum is to keep elk season the same as it is now, but eliminate the break in the Cascade buck deer season, which would allow hunters to hunt both deer and elk at the same time. With both of these options that we're considering, they would create consistent, simpler dates for general deer season in all of Western Oregon. Our survey does include questions on both of these options and which option hunters would prefer, and we'll use those results to help inform the final proposal that we bring forward in September. So now I'd like to move to our second priority issue, which again is our approach to archery seasons in Eastern Oregon. And I'll start with elk archery season. Statewide general archery elk season was established in 1979. And then, shortly after, in 1983, we moved that season to our current 30-day season length. And really, the season has largely remained unchanged now for nearly 40 years. The season timing, duration, and area was created at the time to be very liberal. Because at that time we had pretty low interest in archery hunting. There was limited technology with bows at the time, and had pretty low harvest success rates with archery hunters. If you read in our department's elk management plan, talks about how archery season was originally designed at that time to draw hunters away from crowded rifle seasons that were presenting significant management challenges at the time for the department. But over the last 40 years, archery hunting has become very popular. And that objective of drawing hunters away from rifle seasons was met many years ago. Probably we were starting to talk about some of those issues more than 20 years ago. But since that time, social and political pressures have led to little opportunity for adaptive management and change with our approach to archery seasons. This figure shows the change in Eastern Oregon elk hunter numbers and harvest over time. I already touched on that. The bar graph shows the number of hunters in 1979, 1995, and 2019, with rifle hunters being in orange and archery hunters being in blue. And as you can see, since 1995, the number of rifle hunters in hunting elk in Eastern Oregon has decreased by 50%, and archery hunters has increased by 55%. And on this same graph, the dashed line shows elk harvest, and with rifle harvest again in orange and archery harvest in blue. And since 1995, there's been a 50% decline in rifle harvest and 66% increase in archery. And I do need to point out that throughout this presentation, I'll use the terminology rifle hunt, just because that's what our hunters tend to refer to our primary general seasons and controlled hunts as, whereas in the regs, you'll see them as any legal weapons hunts, because hunters can actually use any weapon that's legal for big game hunting. And although people seldomly do, hunters can choose to hunt with archery equipment during these rifle seasons. There's many benefits as well as challenges with our current general archery seasons in Eastern Oregon. The benefits that we see and we hear from hunters about, many hunters view the hunt as a quality experience. to hunt primarily on public land for bull elk during an ideal time of the year that corresponds with the rut. The season provides a significant amount of annual hunting opportunity for hunters who are interested and physically able to hunt with a bow. There's no limits on tags because of the general season, so hunters are guaranteed a tag to hunt every year. Many hunters like that they can hunt each year in their preferred unit while also having the opportunity to accumulate preference points for the controlled hunt draw. And for hunters that are unsuccessful in the controlled hunt draw, it provides them an opportunity to still be able to hunt that year. In the general season covers almost the entire state, so hunters can hunt many areas in both Eastern and Western Oregon in the same year. And some hunters like the fact that there's no limit on the number of non-resident hunters because of the general season structure. So while there are many benefits, there are also many challenges with the current general season, most of which have increased over time. We have a high hunter density in many of the most popular wildlife management units, particularly in the Blue Mountains and the Wallowa Mountains in the northeast part of the state. And our biologists are concerned that in some areas, the high disturbance during archery season, which is a sensitive time of the year, is contributing to elk distribution problems on private land. And this has also led to frequent archery hunter complaints about hunter crowding and the experience on public land hunting areas. There's also growing inequity in opportunity and harvest in some of these popular units. And really, when we need to make adjustments to elk harvest in a particular unit, the only opportunity for change that we have is to adjust tag numbers for a controlled rifle harvest, because we do not have control over the number of tags or amount of harvest during a general season. And then finally, some hunters have expressed concerns that there is no limit on the number of non-residents during a general season, like there would be during a controlled hunt that has a limit of 5% non-residents. This was an issue that was brought up pretty commonly in the forum. So all of these challenges can relate back to managing rifle elk hunting differently than we're managing archery elk hunting in Eastern Oregon. So a survey that we conducted last year of Oregon resident elk hunters, 75% of elk hunters prefer to hunt with a rifle, while 21% prefer to hunt with archery. We're just through this process just highlighting the fact that those preferences are significantly different than how opportunity and harvest is currently allocated. Just as an example, in 3 of our most popular elk hunting units, the Starkey, Ukiah, and Heppner units in Northeast Oregon, 73% of the branch bull hunters in that unit are during archery season, and they account for 55% of the branch bull harvest in that unit. There's also significant difference in the frequency of hunting opportunity between weapon types. If a hunter chooses in those particular units to hunt with archery equipment, they can hunt branch antler bulls every year, and if they would like, also gain a preference point. But if a hunter chooses to hunt with a rifle in those units, they have to accrue preference points for 4 to 6 years on average before being guaranteed to draw a tag to go hunting. So based on the challenges that I just outlined, we are considering proposing changes to the 2021 Eastern Oregon archery elk seasons. The primary objective would be to reduce archery hunter density where hunter density is believed to be impacting elk distribution and contributing to the shift in elk from public land onto private land and agricultural damage areas. And the second is to allow the department the ability to manage harvest across all weapon types and all hunts when changes are needed to either manage populations, to make changes to meet bull ratio objectives, or to allocate harvest by weapon type or opportunity. And as I outlined earlier, several decades ago, there was reason to manage these hunting opportunities differently, but we believe those reasons no longer exist. So to achieve these two objectives, we're considering proposing to start use the exact same management strategy for archery hunting that we have been using in most places for quite some time for rifle hunting. So the proposal that we're considering would establish controlled archery elk hunting in all of Eastern Oregon wildlife management units. Controlled archery hunt areas would be pretty much identical to controlled rifle bull hunt areas. So what this would look like is in the Blue Mountains and Wallowa Mountains, which are generally our most popular archery hunting units. The controlled hunts would primarily be at the individual wildlife management unit scale, while the surrounding areas of the high desert, the east slope of the Cascades, the Columbia Basin would primarily be larger multi-unit hunt areas. Our approach with this proposal would be to, wherever it was feasible, to maintain or increase archery hunter opportunity. But then in the problem areas, we would be looking to reduce hunter density and move towards shifting some branch bull harvest allocation in units that have a very high proportion of the bull harvest during archery seasons. This would lead to a decrease in archery hunters in some units of the Blue Mountains and Northeast Oregon, but it would also potentially increase archery hunters in some of the surrounding areas. So to put things in perspective, in 2019, we estimated that there were just over 16,300 general season archery elk hunters in Eastern Oregon. And for our draft proposed tag numbers for 2021, we would offer 15,600 controlled archery tags. So I just wanted to show this that, you know, while I talk about reductions, we do not anticipate a massive reduction in the number of archery hunters. And we think there still will be a lot of opportunity for archery hunters to hunt each year, especially considering that all of Western Oregon would remain in a general archery season. As part of this, we are also considering proposing that all of Eastern Oregon controlled hunt tags would only be valid during the dates and areas of those controlled hunts. So this means that Eastern Oregon controlled hunt tags would not be valid during the Western Oregon general season. This is the same way that rifle tags have been for quite some time. The last issue that I wanted to touch on, sorry. All right, the last issue that I wanted to touch on is Eastern Oregon archery deer seasons. It's really an entirely different set of issues than archery elk season. Currently, our archery deer season is also a general season that covers almost all of Eastern Oregon with an unlimited number of tags. And as you heard yesterday, mule deer have been declining for quite some time in Oregon and throughout their range in the Western US. There's multiple factors influencing mule deer populations, but recent ODF&W research and a growing body of knowledge is starting to really look into summer range nutritional deficiencies. And as I believe you heard yesterday from Dr. Darren Clark, Recent ODF&W research in Northeast Oregon has found that mule deer does are not able, during their study, not able to meet their nutritional needs to support lactation, and definitely not a good sign for trying to sustain mule deer populations. This figure just shows that mule deer population decline over the last 40 years. As you can see, we've had close to a 50% decline in population since general archery season began in 1979. And I do just want to make sure everybody understands that I'm not implying in any way that archery season contributed that, or any of our buck deer hunting is contributing to that decline. What I really want to show here is just that since we set up the season structure we're in now, our population has changed drastically. So because of that population decline, we believe that managing archery season with an unlimited number of tags is no longer an appropriate management tool for this declining population. The department is considering proposing to manage archery deer hunting the same as rifle deer hunting in Eastern Oregon. Under this scenario, we would move to controlled archery deer hunting in all of Eastern Oregon units. And this would allow our biologists to make harvest adjustments to all of our hunts in a wildlife management unit when necessary. Our draft proposed tag numbers would be similar to previous general season archery hunters in many units, but in others, there would potentially be decreases due to significant population declines and corresponding reductions in controlled rifle tags that would be proposed this year. And again, like with elk hunts, controlled archery tags would only be valid within the dates and areas of the controlled hunt, and would not be valid during the Western Oregon general season. Wanted to end by providing information on all of the outreach that we have planned over the summer leading up till September. Our outreach on some of these issues started over a year ago with the 2019 Deer and Elk Hunter Survey, followed by the online public forum and the recent hunter survey that I just reported on. And since the first of the year, we have met and provided detailed updates to the leadership of Oregon sport groups. And we also have a meeting scheduled with them in another 2 weeks. And in my conversations with many of them, they've been keeping their membership updated on the issues and the progress. We will also be launching state and local level outreach on proposals that we're considering, and that'll be available and kicked off no later than July 1st. And I'll get into that here in a little bit more details. And just some other examples of things we're doing. We've worked with the Oregon Hunters Association to have an article with much of the same information I'm presenting today, in an article in their July and August magazine, which is just perfect timing for getting the word out about these issues. So I mentioned a website, or really a web page on our department's website that we're developing. And all of our outreach information will direct the public to this website that will have extensive information. People on that webpage will be able to have the ability to sign up to receive email updates throughout the process as we post new information or have final proposals. They'll also be able to submit input to the department online right on that site. We'll have a section about hunter opinions and preferences, and it'll have reports of the surveys and the online forum. And I'll have a lot of details on the changes that are being considered to 2021 hunting seasons in YouTube format and in written format. And we will post final department proposals. They'll be available in the late August timeframe, no later than September 1st. And at that point, we'll really be directing people to the commission process for how to comment and provide testimony, and all that will be on this project webpage that we're developing. So the issue of Eastern Oregon archery seasons has already generated a lot of good discussion in the hunting community, and I suspect over the summer generate even more. I do worry that some hunters will start choosing sides and trying to make this a rifle hunter versus archery hunter issue. And that is in no way our intent or our desire. We do need to remember that we manage hunting opportunity for all Oregon hunters, and many of those hunters hunt with a variety of weapon types and hunt with both archery and rifle equipment. As I've outlined today, things have changed substantially since 1979 when the season framework was set up. There was a reason back then to manage rifle and archery season differently, but we believe that that reason is not there today. So I do really look forward to continuing to work on this issue over the summer and have more discussions with the hunting community. And we will be coming back to the commission later this summer with department proposals. So with that, Chair Wall, that is all I had. And if we have time, we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Nick. Very informative. Commissioners, in the interest of time, if you have burning questions, let's ask them now. If you can contact Nick later, that would be great, just because we have a packed morning. But if there are burning questions now, go right ahead.
Mark Labhart has his hand raised.
Go ahead.
It's not a burning question, Chair Wall. I'll talk to him later. So thanks.
Any other commissioners? Then thank you, Nick. And you may hear from some of us with questions that we didn't get to ask today.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item is, if we could go right on to the temporary rules. Director Melcher, is there anything you could do to summarize what we got last night, if there are items that came in late on the temporary rules? I'm not sure all the commissioners were able to see those.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Wall. You do have a number of temporary rules that were emailed to you either late yesterday or early today. And I think this is a large package. Of course, it includes many of the changes we've made to address the COVID-19 pandemic. And then it also includes a lot of just routine rulemakings that we do as we manage both commercial, tribal, and recreational fisheries in season. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there's questions about any of the specific rules. And if I can't answer them, I'm hoping I can phone a friend that's also online here to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you. Whoops. Greg, Commissioner Woolley, can you run the meeting for a minute? Mine just dropped out and I'm getting back on.
Okay, Chair Wall, I'll cover that while you address technology issues. I'll get back on video again. And so, commissioners, are there any questions that you'd like to bring up about the temporary rules, or any clarifications that you would like from Director Melcher or any other staff that he may call on? Okay, well, it sounds like there aren't any questions about the rules. Would anyone like to make a motion to pass the rules as they're written now?
Commissioner Woolley, this is Commissioner Wall. I'm back on. And I do want to say one thing before we do the motion, if I could, and that is an appreciation. I have heard a lot about the temporary or the angling sanctuaries in the Columbia. The work is appreciated and it's great to have those, and I look forward very much to seeing those. I think we're going to see them permanently in August. So thank you to the department for those. And with that, I would make a motion that we adopt the temporary rules. We confirm the temporary rules. May we ask legal to let us know if we need to give a specific title to these?
Yes, thank you, Chair Wall. This is Anna Kavarian. Michelle Tate would have emailed to you all and has also, I believe, posted online a version. And I think that it would be sufficient for your motion to acknowledge that the most recent version, it should be, 6:12 today, probably around 8 a.m. And confirming that you've reviewed and ratified all rules that are identified in that. I don't want to call it a correspondence, but in that document. It would be the equivalent of what is normally your TAN agenda. But if you can just make a motion that the most recent circulated version today's that contains all of the temporary rules, that's what you are ratifying today, that would be sufficient.
And Chair Wall, I would just add that you could reference it as the document that includes temporary rules adopted from April 7th through June 11th.
So moved in that case.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we ratify the rules that are before, the temporary rules that are before us up and through June 12th, 2020 at 8:50 a.m. Any questions or discussions? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe it's unanimous. Those opposed? Carries. Thank you.
Can you hear me, Bob Spellbrink?
Yes.
Okay. Can I abstain now? My phone blew up yesterday because of some of the new regs that just came out yesterday as far as on the coastal fault Chinook. And anyway, and like I say, I got all kinds of calls already and text over the fall regulations from like Celeste South. And I don't know if those, I never did see those earlier.
Then we will as a mention.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. Can we move please to the minutes of the April 17th meeting? And are there any revisions? If not, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the April 17th meeting?
I'll move to approve those minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And I will second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. We'll move then to the budget item, and is Erica back? Let me just mention to the commissioners that we will hear the budget. There are people signed up to testify, and to the public, thank you for following this and being ready to testify. We need to identify any issues or raise any questions that we have about the budget or things that we would like the department to consider, so that we can have a budget ready to go in July when it comes back to us for approval. So could we have Erica Kleiner go ahead with the presentation?
Good morning, Chair Wall. This is Brandy Nichols. I'm actually starting our presentation on budget.
Go ahead. Sorry for
Thank
that.
you. No, thank you. Let me get the slideshow going.
And Chair, while she's getting that going, I just wanted to let you know that I asked Brandy and Erica to move to a different conference room because their Wi-Fi connection earlier seemed to be poor. So now they're in different areas. So hopefully that'll improve the connectivity
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Melcher. Thank you, Chair Wall. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Brandy Nichols, our Budget and Economic Services Manager. Deputy Director Kleiner and I are here today to review with you ODFW's proposed 2021-23 agency request budget. So I'll start with the governor's vision for Oregon's 2021-23 budget, and I'll share ODFW's principles for developing its budget. Oh, I apologize. I had a little glitch with my slide. I'll give the recap of public engagement contributions to the development, and then I'll provide some context information for our agency request budget. Deputy Director Kleiner will then present a review of our policy option package requests. We will hear public testimony. There'll be an opportunity for questions, and then we'll conclude the presentation. So with today's meeting, we are presenting our proposed budget for your review. And then with the July meeting, that's when we will be seeking commission approval of our agency request budget. So with one layer of the budget development process, we work to align our priorities with the governor's vision for the upcoming budget. As a natural resource agency, ODFW falls under the environmental stewardship area. Earlier this year, the governor's office shared information with agencies around the agencies. This includes a focus on policies that lead the fight against climate change and preserve Oregon's natural environment while also supporting long-term economic growth. Specific areas of focus include water, fire and energy, climate, the Portland Harbor Superfund, the Columbia River Basin, natural resource agency capacity, outdoor recreation, and wildlife conservation. So as we develop our budget, we keep the following principles in mind. We know that we must develop a sustainable budget. This means that we operate reserves. We also know that our budget is fundamentally tied to our agency mission. The budget encompasses the funding for our programs to accomplish their important work. We work developing our budget. We recognize that good communication, both with our staff and our stakeholders during the process, is critical. We make ongoing efforts to monitor and analyze revenues along with agency expenditures. We work to ensure that resources are available to meet our mission, while we are also sensitive to costs for customers to participate in the outdoor opportunities that we offer. We seek state general fund for programs with broad public benefit, and we keep in mind that our budget needs to be approved by the commission, the governor, and the legislature. So here is a recap of where we currently are in the budget development timeline. So March through May is the typical time in the process for our EBAC and town hall meetings. So this year, of course, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, our in-person EBAC and town hall meetings were canceled. As a substitute for those in-person meetings, we created an online comment form through which EBAC members could provide budget questions and feedback to us. So then, similar to an in-person meeting, ODFW administrators provided responses to questions we received in writing this time, of course. So that compiled document of all EBAC comments, questions, along with our response, we also posted that to our public website. So you can see in the timeline where we are with today's presentation in June, and then the July meeting reflects where we will be asking your approval of our proposed budget. Then we submit our complete agency request budget document to the governor's office at the end of August, and in early December, governor's budget information will be released. So public engagement is a very important part of our budget development process. And there were some common themes in the EBAC comments and public emails that we have received. So we saw overall legislative concepts that we have proposed for the 2021 session. Within that general support, we also saw support to eliminate the concept seeking flexibility for our investment of money in the State Wildlife Fund. Related to fees, we saw general support for combining the daily shellfish license into the daily angling license. With our policy option packages, we saw general support for requests that correspond with the establishment of a habitat division. However, we also saw strong recognition of the potential impacts to funding related to COVID-19. So overall, the feedback we received was that funding should be focused on essential programs and ODFW's most critical, defer the actual establishment of a new division to the 2023-25 biennium. Another policy option package feedback item we received included support to continue funding OSP overtime. So to follow up from comments we received, we did remove the legislative concept around flexibility for the State Wildlife Fund investment. And we are pursuing a legislative concept to combine the daily shellfish license into the daily angling license and then reduce the overall cost of that license. OSP overtime funding for winter range enforcement will continue. And for the Habitat Division, we have included the establishment of a new Habitat Division in our proposed budget, which reflects the governor's priority. And we have also given agency priority ranking to this policy option pack. More about this when we get to her section of the presentation. So now I'll share some context information around our 2021-23 budget development. So this is a visual of overall state general fund projections. So with the current biennium, general fund makes up about 9 graph. The green line, or the one along the top, shows the projected general fund expenditure trend. The red line, or the next one down, shows the general fund revenue projection trend from pre-COVID state revenue forecasts. And then that blue line, or the third one down, shows the updated general fund revenue projection trend from the May 2020 state revenue forecast. And that bottom line illustrates the projected gap between expenditures and revenue when looking at that updated May 2020 revenue forecast line. So what this graph highlights for us is that future state general fund revenue is expected to be at a lower level, covers from and deals with the impacts of COVID. So we financial office, what effects or how this general fund outlook might impact our 2021-23 budget development, either our current service level budget or with our new funding requests. So Oregon does have both dedicated and non-dedicated general fund reserves, and it's not known at this time how much relief of that projected revenue gap might be covered with those reserves, or how much help potential federal funding could give. So this graph illustrates statewide lottery fund information. So lottery funds make up about 2% of our overall budget. And in this chart, the funding amounts we receive are included in those dark blue sections of the bars. So statewide lottery funds did take a hit from the COVID-19 closures of bars and restaurants. The light blue bars in this graph, those ones along the top, those represent the total state lottery revenue projections from pre-COVID forecasts. And then the other bars kind of superimposed on top of that, those reflect the current revenue projection trend from the May 2020 state revenue forecast. So what we see from this graph is that while we see a significant downward shift in revenues reflected in the 2019-21 biennium bar, which is where that May 2020 state revenue forecast came out, we do see that drop related to the COVID closures of bars and restaurants. When you look at the trend line of those updated bars, the future projected revenue increases start at that lower level, but the trend line is consistent with pre-COVID growth rates. So to put that in a different way, once bars and restaurants fully reopen, the expectation is that statewide lottery funds will increase at the same rate as they were before the COVID closures. So this graph gives us a visual of our federal U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services wildlife restoration and sport fish restoration funds apportionments over time. So the revenue trends here reflect generally no growth in available funding and even show a decline with the apportionment for federal fiscal year 2020. So thinking back to our principles for developing a budget, our federally funded programs really do require ongoing analysis and management to prioritize critical program functions and ensure that we can sustainably operate within available revenues. So this slide moves on and illustrates our sport license sales trends over time and projected into the future. So overall participation in Oregon and nationwide have been declining or leveling off. You'll notice here our graph lines do seem to show an increase in the year 2016 and our license structure in that year to begin charging for pioneer and youth licenses. So our future sales projections are based on historical sales data and account for trend effects as well as the seasonality of sales. Our projection model is designed to put a greater emphasis on the trends. When we look into the future, our license sales projections really do not indicate significant participation growth. So we talked about license sales trends. This slide now focuses on projected license revenue and fund balance through the 2021-23 biennium. So this graph depicts real dollars for revenue, expenditures, and fund balance. And what that means, real dollars account for inflationary changes using the West Region Consumer Price Index. And this graph is showing information in 2018 dollars. So the gray line, the expenditure trend line, reflects maintaining current service level operations. And this graph illustrates that revenue is projected to have a real decline. Another thing to note about this graph, there are two revenue projection scenarios presented here. So one makes a more conservative assumption around license revenue trends, and this is illustrated with the solid revenue line and the solid green fund balance line. So this scenario's revenue projections continue the general downward trend in license sales that we saw through license year 2019. So we did construct a second scenario, and that scenario is centered around more optimistic assumptions on the continuing rate of license sales decline. And this is illustrated with the dotted lines there in the revenue line and the fund balance line. So as Deputy Director Kleiner spoke about during the director's report, in early 2020, we have seen evidence of improved license sales. And even during the restrictions put into place during the COVID closures, we saw steady, even increased participation during the months of April and May. It's too early to know at this point if this trend or pattern will be sustained, but we did estimate a second scenario for license revenue projections that softens that future decline in license sales, assuming sustained sales improvement continues. So when you look at that fund balance line, there is approximately a $4 million difference there between projected license fund balance in the two scenarios, $29 million versus $33 million. So when we look at this graph, kind of the takeaways from this, what we learn is the graph does show that expenditures are projected to outpace revenue. So yes, our overall license fund balance is projected to decrease through the 2021-23 biennium. However, at the end of that biennium, our projected balance is still at approximately 2 to 2.5 months of operating reserves. So while these projections illustrate for us that we don't have excess available license funds, the health of our fund balance does allow us to strategically delay a fee increase for sport licenses. So with our 2021-23 biennium budget, we are not planning to pursue a price increase for the 2022 license year. And I will also mention the same situation is true for commercial fishing licenses. We are not planning to pursue a price increase around commercial licenses with our 2021-23 budget. So this slide shows our program area expenditures in our 2021-23 proposed agency request budget next to our 2019-21 legislatively adopted budget. So the context around us talked through, along with the uncertainty of long-term impacts from COVID, sets the stage for our 2021-23 budget to be largely a current service level budget. We do include some new funding requests in specific areas, and the next section of our presentation will go into more detail on these new funding requests. So here in this graph, a couple of differences you'll notice between 2021-23 and 2019-21. You'll see the $10 million under major construction in 2021-23 funding to address deferred maintenance needs. Our last request was not granted during the 2019-21 biennium budget development, and which is why you don't see a corresponding wedge over in that pie chart. The 2021-23 pie chart also reflects establishment of the Habitat Division, and that Habitat Division wedge includes new funding requests for new resources, along with internal program realignment into the division. So this slide looks at our budgeted revenue in 2021-23 proposed budget next to, again, our 2019-21 legislatively adopted budget. And budgeted revenues also reflect and illustrate that our 2021-23 budget is largely a current service level budget. Revenue amounts are fairly consistent between the different fund types. You will observe the increased general fund in 2021-23, which corresponds with new funding requests included in our policy option packages. And with that, we'll transition over to Deputy Director Kleiner to review with you our policy option packages.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. Just kind of a check-in since I was a little choppy earlier. Kristen, can you hear me okay?
Can hear you perfectly, thank you.
All right, perfect. So I will get started. So good morning, Chair Wall, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Erica Kleiner, Deputy Director for Administration. So as Brandy mentioned, I'll be delivering the rest of the presentation, which will focus on our 2021-23 policy option packages. All right, so I'm going to begin with some context for policy option packages and how they fit into the state budget process. So we build our agency request budget in 3 basic phases. So we have our base budget, our current service level budget, and our agency request budget. So today, the feedback that you give on the budget is informing our agency request budget. So our base budget is our 2019-21 legislatively adopted budget plus any interim adjustments. So those happen in emergency boards and special sessions. So this becomes our legislatively approved budget. We then build in costs for inflation, among other factors, to develop our current service level budget, which reflects the costs of continuing our programs in our legislatively approved budget. So policy option packages, or POPs for short, are the final phase of our budget build and largely the focus of the presentation today. So our POPs reflect the policy decisions we make to reduce or increase our programs or our expenditures. So as you're considering our POPs today, think about them as enhancements to the continuation of our current budget that reflect the agency's priorities. Ultimately, the budget we're sharing today reflects both our policy agenda and our financial plan that we would like Governor Brown to recommend to the legislature. So we categorize our POPs into two distinct groups. So we have our continuation POPs and our new POPs. We do prioritize the continuation of our existing programs and positions above POPs that reflect new programs and positions. So we do this because we consider our continuation POPs as already an integral part of our base programs. So the statewide budget process kind of fits in here. So I wanted to mention that when we originally make a request for a limited duration position, we have to return for 2 biennia after that original request before the position becomes permanent. So limited duration positions do expire at the end of every biennium. So finally, capital construction is the budget category we use for our deferred maintenance packages. And capital construction is a little bit unique in that that expenditure limitation lasts for 6 years. It has a longer life cycle than a normal POP. So that is 2 years. All right, this next table reflects how our POPs are categorized in terms of our agency programs. So we are proposing a total of 24 policy option packages. They are evenly split between continuation POPs and new POPs. And as you can see in the chart on this slide, we do align a majority of our POPs with inland fisheries and also with habitat. And next is a funding summary of our 2021 policy option packages. So just over 30% of our POPs are a general fund request. About 55% are funded with either non-federal contract funds or other funds, with the remaining 15% supported primarily with federal funds, but a small amount of lottery funds as well. And just a technical note for the slide, we do have 6 position requests that are funded with a portion of lottery funds, but they are aligned with their primary funding source on this slide. The next table displays all 12 of our continuation policy option packages. As a reminder, these requests reflect the continuation of existing programs or staff, primarily doing 2 things: converting limited duration positions into permanent positions, or just continuing limited duration positions into the next biennium. So the only exceptions to this are the voluntary access and habitat program, which is a current program just requesting to use available funding, and the continuation of our deferred maintenance POPs with a new round of bond funding. All right, now we're going to move into individual continuation POPs. POP 110, our deferred maintenance package, establishes 3 limited duration positions. So 1 facilities engineer, 1 project manager, and 1 engineering technician to carry out construction activities. So this is the second phase of our multi-biennial plan to improve our capital assets. So we're requesting additional bond authority to improve our offices, storage buildings, shops, public facilities, and road systems. So in many cases, these improvements are improvements to HVAC systems, roofs, structural issues with our buildings, water intrusion issues, things like that. We did receive approval for bond issuance in the 2017 session to improve the infrastructure of our hatcheries. So we're still working through those projects we have through the end of next biennium, but we have seen many hatcheries with significant improvements as a result of those activities. So POP 109, deferred maintenance facilities engineer position. So this package uses existing bond funding to continue 1 existing project engineer position. So the position, this aligns with the hatchery efforts. So it's been in place since last biennium, currently focuses on 9 deferred maintenance projects at hatcheries. And this package would allow us to extend that capacity into the next biennium. And the reason we're requesting this position as limited duration relates to its tie to that 2017 bond funding, because that is not a permanent fund source. And I'm just going to take a minute. I just realized that my video is not turned on. There we go. Okay. So back to the next slide. Pop 110 is the Oregon Conservation Strategy Farm Bill Wildlife Biologist positions. So this package converts 3 existing limited duration field biologist positions into permanent positions. So those positions currently reside in the Dalles, Hefner, and Baker City. And the package also establishes 1 new field biologist position in Central Point. The funding for these positions come from our partnership with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, with a lottery fund match. And the expanded partnership lends us capacity to reduce future listing of declining species in Oregon. So POP 101 is just the corresponding POP on the fisheries side. That package converts 1 current limited duration position, field biologist position in Tillamook, into a permanent position, also funded by NRCS with lottery fund match. And the position provides capacity and expertise for further development of the Farm Bill program. All right, moving on to POP 105, Culverts Fish Passage. This package continues 1 existing limited duration position to inventory and prioritize ODOT road crossings for fish passage and implement the culvert repair pilot project. So the benefit to us is obviously funding for a position through fish passage compensation funds, which are provided by ODOT, which we are able to use to fix priority fish passage barrier issues. POP 102, Voluntary Access and Habitat Program. So this package funds were awarded to us by the Voluntary Public Access and Habitat Incentive Program. So the grants are focused on projects. All right, just checking in, Kristen, can you hear me okay still?
Yeah, there was a little bit there where your audio kind of cut out though.
Okay, I saw that, so I'll watch for it. I apologize. Back to POP 102, the grants are focused on projects that increase public hunting access on private lands and also projects that make improvements to habitat. And this package is funded through the USDA Farm Bill NRCS. All right, POP 103, Klamath Reintroduction and Monitoring Biologist position. So this package will continue 1 existing limited duration position, a staff biologist. It represents a shift to the monitoring and implementation phase of the Klamath Reintroduction Implementation Plan. A key focus of this position would be the evaluation of the effectiveness of the dam removal and reintroduction of anadromous fish. So the position does have a dual focus. Portion of this position, approximately 25%, would focus on the development of a Wallowa Lake sockeye reintroduction plan. And the funding here comes from a combination of general fund and Pacific Coast salmon recovery funds. POP 104, Habitat Tools for Oregon Coast and Beyond. This package converts 1 limited duration position into a permanent position in order to continue efforts to develop and implement tools for modeling stream flows and fish species distribution models. So this information is needed to inform fish conservation and management decisions that are resilient to the changing drivers for water availability in Oregon. And this package is funded through ODOT and OWEB. All right, on to our last few continuation POPs, POP 107, application development positions. So this package converts 2 existing limited duration information systems specialist positions into permanent positions. The past practice that the agency had of hiring contractors was both costly and inefficient. And so this package would allow us to hire and retain our own staff, leading to better business and technology outcomes. So this is important to remember that this is a neutral budget impact. So what that means is we're simply shifting other funds from our contract services category in the information services division budget to personal services. And finally, the package provides for position authority for those 2 positions. POP 108, Recreational Fisheries Project Coordinator. This package converts 1 existing limited duration construction project manager position to a permanent position. So the position will increase staff capacity for hatchery and fishing access projects by planning and facilitation. And the position is funded through our restoration and enhancement funds, so it's other funds. POP 106, Central Oregon Irrigation District Mitigation and Enhancement Coordinator. This package does 2 things. 1, it establishes a permanent staff biologist position, but it also abolishes 1 existing biological science assistant position. So funding for the position comes from the Central Oregon Irrigation District. Those funds supported a portion of the position in the past. The position was also supported by hydro funds. Those funds no longer being available, the position was reclassified downward with a negative outcome. So this package is bringing that position back up to the higher level to meet our obligations under our agreement with the Central Oregon Irrigation District to engage in biological and aquatic habitat monitoring and restoration activities. All right, moving on to POP 111. Debt service for deferred maintenance. So this package allows us to obtain general fund to pay for the financing costs associated with our deferred maintenance projects. So these expenditures will cover both the principal and interest payments related to the payment of the debt in POP 110. All right, we're on to new policy option packages. So this next table displays all 12 of our new POPs. So as a reminder, these packages represent requests for approval for new programs or positions. All right, the first of which is POP 112, Habitat Division Establishment. So this is our main POP request for resources to establish a habitat division. This is one of several habitat POPs. All of them are general fund requests. So as a reminder, we were originally asked by Governor Brown to establish a habitat division as part of the budget build for the current biennium. For background, last year we established a cross-division, cross-agency planning team, which evaluated and proposed the initial concepts for the habitat division. Our executive leadership team worked with the planning team to finalize the concepts for stakeholder engagement and also for your consideration today. So we are requesting the establishment of 6 new permanent positions in this POP. So it's 1 division administrator position, along with 5 regional habitat biologist positions. So our plan is largely a realignment of existing positions that spend the majority of their time on habitat related activities. A majority of the requested positions would be on the ground, meaning they would work in the regions under the existing watershed management structure. The division would be very active in directly supporting habitat work around the state. And as the org chart shows on the slide, programs that would move to the habitat division include water quality and quantity, all of our existing regional habitat biologists, the habitat restoration program, the Western Oregon Stream Restoration Program, our NRCS liaison positions, the Willamette Wildlife Mitigation Program, and the BPA Habitat Restoration Program. The division will be primed to lead efforts to protect, restore, and enhance habitat for Oregon's fish and wildlife. And I wanted to mention, we see 4 kind of main benefits of establishing the division. So 1, the Habitat Division helps us emphasize the really broad responsibilities we have as a department. Secondly, it positions us to more effectively work with other agencies as we work to promote habitat health. Third, it represents a really important third leg of the stool, if you will. Our mission references fish, wildlife, and their habitats. So it's part of our organizational structure. And it also focuses, sorry about that, just a second. Okay, so it also, the 4th benefit, it also focuses on the resources needed to address the challenges that climate change presents us with. Okay. Moving on to POP 113. Before I do though, the next several policy option packages all relate to or support POP 112, the Habitat Division establishment. So POP 113 is a more technical POP in nature. So it's simply reversing a fund shift that happened leading up to the current budget. So the 2019-21 legislatively adopted budget contained a fund shift that happened with 4 habitat program positions from general fund to other funds licensed. And so this package is asking to return that portion of those 4 positions back to general fund where they resided before the fund shift. And the work performed by the habitat program, it really aligns with general fund. So it addresses habitat for all fish and wildlife species, which benefits all Oregonians. The next 2 POPs include requests for additional water positions. So POP 114, Basin Water Planning and Mitigation Coordination. The package establishes 2 new permanent positions, which will enable us to contribute to critical water planning processes, including mitigation for new water uses and local water planning efforts. So this isn't capacity that we currently have. All right, POP 115, Willamette Basin Complex Water Issues. So this POP establishes 3 new permanent positions with responsibility for coordination of Willamette water activities. And the coordination and analytic tasks really need to happen prior to full allocation of the water in the reservoirs. And again, it's another general fund request. POP 116, Western Oregon Stream Restoration Program. So we currently have 3 biologist positions supporting this program, which are located in Clackamas, Tillamook, and Roseburg. And this package establishes 3 additional field biologist positions in Newport, Charleston, and Central Point. And those positions would work to implement the restoration and enhancement of salmonid habitats in Western Oregon. All right, POP 117, Good Neighbor Authority Coordinator. So this is the final POP that corresponds with that main Habitat Division establishment POP. So it establishes 1 new limited duration Good Neighbor Authority Coordinator position. So the goal of this package is to improve the quality of fish and wildlife habitat on public lands. And funds for this position come from a few sources. So U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, Pittman Robertson, and are matched by other funds licensed dollars. POP 118, Wallowa Lake Sockeye Salmon Reintroduction. So this is a reintroduction pilot project to develop hatchery broodstock for sockeye salmon to be used in Wallowa Lake eventually. If you recall, a portion of the position in POP 103 for the Klamath reintroduction position will be used to also conduct reintroduction planning efforts for Wallowa Lake. And this package requests general fund for development of the broodstock and also for services and supplies needed by that position. POP 119 is the Jordan Cove Energy Project Liaison POP. So this package establishes 1 new limited duration position. It's funded through a renewal for the grant we have with the Jordan Cove Project. And this position will provide consultation and technical support and act as our single point of contact here at ODFW for the project and work through the review process of the project's state and federal construction permit applications. The position will apply both our habitat mitigation policy and also our fish passage laws to the projects to really ensure good outcomes for fish and wildlife populations. POP 120, Shellfish and Estuary Assessment. So this package establishes 3 new permanent positions that will enable us to increase the frequency of stock assessments of bay clams and also just more general assessment of estuary habitat. The package also expands the services and supplies budget to allow for contracting with outside dive teams to conduct underwater clam surveys. And then finally, the package aligns with all of the recent legislative efforts, really striving to increase the frequency of stock assessments. So one example is Senate Bill 1025 from 2019. All right, our final few new POPs, POP 121 is Orca salmon forage. So this request is for general fund, which would allow us to increase production of spring Chinook salmon to feed the vulnerable southern resident killer whale populations. So 2.8 million spring Chinook smolts would be produced annually by 4 hatcheries. So Klamath, Oxbow, Leeburg, and Willamette. And it also contains several hatchery projection position fund shifts from other funds and federal funds to general fund. And then POP 122 is technical assistance for Tidegate partnership. This package establishes one new limited duration fish passage engineer position to provide technical engineering recommendations and evaluation of Tidegate designs. And it really supports a more efficient and successful Tidegate replacement program. And then POP 123, this package establishes one new limited duration Endangered Species Act coordinator position that will provide support to the Department of State Lands to ensure ESA compliance when issuing removal fill permits. And the funding for that position comes from the Department of State Lands. All right, thank you for your time and attention today. Although you're not taking formal action on the budget today, we are happy to answer any question you may have. And with that, Chair Wall, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Great presentation, as is usually the case with you. Commissioners, do you have questions and of either Erica or Brandy? Actually, why don't, maybe I could start with a couple and then other commissioners may have some more. You didn't get into the reduction options, but how do you expect those to be used?
Chair Wall and commissioners, it's hard to say at this point. So we've been asked for a couple of different kind of exercises, if you will, to put together reduction options. One of those is the DAS reduction options list. The one you may be referring to in the commission packet is a statutory requirement for a list of 10% reduction options. And we do those with all of our fund types. So it really just depends on the particular revenue source and what happens. It's hard to say at this time. You've heard earlier today, certainly there are significant pressures on both state general fund and lottery funds. So to the best of our ability, it's certainly a challenging exercise, but we put those together with an eye that these reduction options may occur. It's just a little early in the process to know kind of how deep the actual cuts will be.
Just to follow up, thank you. To follow up, could you talk about how the reduction options relate to the POPs? Because there is some overlap where at least the same kind of work is in both.
Sure, Chair Wall and commissioners. There certainly is some overlap there. Western Oregon Stream Restoration Program is a good example of that. Certainly we don't want to take those cuts. Those are very painful reductions to make. But that's, we try to use our program priorities and just to the best of our ability, offer up reductions. It's a prioritization process at the end of the day, and we do the best we can to offer up reductions that kind of align with the department's priorities. I think that, certainly the hope is those reductions won't be too deep, but they may be, as far as having some overlap with our policy option packages. I think that's difficult to avoid, but it's certainly there to some extent.
Just a couple specific follow-ups on those reduction packages still. A couple of them jump out just for the number of positions that would be involved if they actually happened. And one of those is a federal fund option for reduction that looks like it lists 33 positions that are doing white and green sturgeon work in the Columbia. Could you just say a little bit more about that one if you happen to? I don't know how you would know all of these in your head, but do you know if that's most of the work that we do on those two species?
Chair Wall and commissioners, I don't have a good sense of how that fits into the overall work and positions. But I could certainly follow up and provide that information later.
Okay, I have some other specifics, so why don't I just check with you later on those? Maybe we could check with other commissioners. We do have some hands raised. So Commissioner Labhart.
Hey, thank you, Chair Wall. And Erica, Brandy, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sure glad that we are postponing this till July, because I think, with the special session that's going to happen, it's going to talk about the current biennium, and we should have a clearer picture on state and federal funding, hopefully for the next biennium. And I think things are going to change dramatically. So hopefully there'll be some more federal funds that will come down from the federal government in terms of incentive programs to help maybe fund some of these programs from the other funds. And, I think that general fund is going to be pretty tight. Not pretty tight. I think it's going to be really tough, a general fund session to try to secure general funds. So I'm very supportive of the department's position on just maintaining what we have and trying to keep the existing programs at the current service level and the FTEs that we have, and fully realize that even then we're going to be taking reductions. So I have a couple questions. First, was there any discussion about the passage or potential passage of the Renewable for America's Wildlife Act in the discussion around the Habitat Division?
Chair Wall and commissioners, certainly that came into play. What the planning team really did is we asked them to be relatively conservative with coming forward with asking for new positions in 2021-23, but they did look long-term. So they did look into the future, and they put together a longer-term plan that certainly, if additional funding is available, from RAWA, as you mentioned, we could cover some of the needs, some of our hopes for the future. So it's kind of a two-stage plan. One is short-term general fund requests during 2021-23 session, and then we certainly have a list of positions that we hope to have funded in the future.
But it's not included in part of your budget pops.
It is not.
Okay. Second question and last question. In reading the EBAC input, clearly there was strong impetus for not funding the Habitat Division and maintaining what we have. I'm going to support the recommendation for the Habitat Division. I think it is very important that we reestablish the Habitat Division in the department. Even though it's going to be tough, we've got a placeholder now. We've got exactly what the department would like to have. Whether that comes out of the legislative session is yet to be determined. But we've got some legislative practice now with the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. It was established by the legislature, so there's legislative support for it. It needs a Habitat Division to help implement some of this funding that we're having raising right now, and hopefully we'll be getting some match from that. And I think that we need to reestablish that to get our conservation strategy in place. And so even though there's strong impetus to not do that, I want to support the establishment of the Habitat Division. What it's going to look like in the final work from our legislators. It took us two biennium to get the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund established. It wasn't established at the role that we'd like it to be, but we at least got it established, and we at least are making some progress there. And I think it might be the same way that happens with the Habitat Division. It may not be totally what the department would like to see, but at least we've got a placeholder there and we can move forward. So I want to go on record of supporting the POP request, even though there was significant input about cutting that program. So I think we need to move forward with the Habitat Division. That's all my comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Woolley.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I also wanted to express my appreciation for the prioritization of the Habitat Division in the POPs. And I have a couple more questions. So, you know, what we've seen, and this is some of Brandy's graphs, that our revenue, especially from Pittman Robertson, rises and falls based on public perception of the philosophies of the current federal administration of the day. So we've seen those rises and falls over the past 12 years based on who's in office. So I'm just wondering, are those considerations, because we have enough evidence now of how that rises and falls, are you considering those administration shifts in your revenue projections, say for as soon as this November, you know, and moving forward?
I'm literally raising my hand, not just figuratively. I'm literally raising my hand.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Wall and Commissioner Woolley. The short answer is no. We don't do that. That's a little like reading a crystal ball that we can't read. So we do not include any of those potential swings in when we're looking at projecting Pittman Robertson. I will say though that our strategy, because Pittman Robertson, if you recall back on that graph, the sport fish restoration side is a pretty flat, or if it has increases or changes in trajectory, they're very generally mild changes in trajectory, whereas Pittman Robertson historically has a much greater oscillation, much larger swings annually or even longer term. And so one of our strategies with Pittman Robertson is that we have generally not put permanent program on Pittman Robertson. We've used it to, in many cases, address one-time expenditures like in maintaining or improving our wildlife area infrastructure, or short-term projects where we know we've got we have a 3-year window of work that we want to do on a particular species. So we generally have not used it on permanent base program staff.
Okay, thanks, Director Melcher. I have a couple more questions.
Go ahead.
So if the POPs that convert limited duration positions to permanent positions are not approved, what happens to those positions?
So Chair Wall and Commissioner Woolley, those positions would expire at the end of the biennium.
Okay. And then since a portion of the biologists for the POP positions are already represented by existing staff, would the new Habitat Division being funded by general funds actually be a savings to the department?
Commissioner Woolley, do you mind repeating the question?
Yes. So a portion of the biologist positions, some of the POP positions are already represented by existing staff. And so would the new Habitat Division being funded by general funds actually be a savings for the department? Does that make sense?
I understand your question, Commissioner. I don't know if Erica wants to answer, but if I might, Chair Wall, the vast majority of our Habitat Division related policy packages they represent new staff and new programs. So in that sense, the answer to your question is no, it would not represent a savings. There is one exception to that, and that is that one of those packages is a fund shift, where in the last budget process, the legislature fund shifted general fund out of those habitat positions, and we're asking to have it be fund shifted back onto general fund. So in that one example, in that one case, there would be some savings of license dollars, which I think is what you're referring to.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Not a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Melcher. That's all the questions I have right now.
Thank you. Commissioner Zarnowitz, question, comment?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was very good and help clarify some things. I also support the Habitat Division, and I figured it's a high priority given the climate change information that we just heard in the potential rules. One thing I think, if it comes down to that they're not planning to fund as much as we wanted, that it's still possible with a small adjustment to create the Habitat Division anyway, because the staff, a lot of the staff are already there, and you can pull them together into the division and then go back the next biennium and get additional funds. That's not something obviously you can propose in this budget, but to keep in your minds, I guess, for if any negotiations come forward. Also, I have a specific comment on POP 119 that is shown up in the Wildlife Division, but yet the description of that position is classic. What the Habitat Division did in the Habitat Division 20 years ago was working on Jordan Cove. That's how long, at least, it's been around. So it seems to me that that should be one of the positions that goes into the Habitat Division. I think, let's see. Yeah, and I saw that the Western Commissioner Wall, Chair Wall mentioned this, but the Western Oregon stream restoration positions are some of the positions proposed for cuts. And I guess there would have to be, if the Habitat Division goes forward, those would wind up needing to be maintained. Otherwise, you'd wind up with 2 new positions, but you'd lose 3 in that program. So those are just my comments at this point, but I appreciate it. I like the document that you put together. I think that really explained how the budget links with all the programs.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde.
Thank you. I also want to just echo thanks for all the hard work on putting this budget together and thinking through the contingencies for the times that we find ourselves in. I have had a bit of a time and I was able to talk to Chair Wall about this a little bit yesterday, which was good, kind of reconciling the POP requests and then also potentially taking them out on the other side with the potential reductions if we reach that point. So I'm still, trying to get my head around how this is working. I also was pretty interested in the community comments. My sense is that I feel like I want to support the Habitat Division, but I also feel like that division needs to, there needs to be just a little bit clearer articulation of that, because there were comments in there about how some of that work is already being done with the various field staff. And I just would like to respect those comments and just say that articulating that is important. And I also feel like, even as we go to the legislature, we fortunately had a pretty amazing workshop yesterday on the climate change package that's coming before the commission. And what I appreciated about that was how the department had really gave some fantastic examples of how climate change is affecting our state's fish and wildlife, but it was done in a really practical way rather than just sort of this ambiguous sound the alarm, the world is going under on us. And I guess I'm just saying that any of that sort of communication that can ground these sort of large, big concepts in ways that communities can understand is important. And I think that is maybe important in relation to these comments that I was seeing about the habitat division. So make that more real maybe for folks that are stretching to understand the relevance and importance. So I think it's really possible to do that, but I think it might need to be done, just my gut sense.
Thank you. I would like to go back and also talk about the Habitat Division. I do absolutely support reestablishing the Habitat Division. I think it's critical to our work for habitat, and as Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde mentioned, it's the work underneath our climate response as well, in order to make Oregon as resilient as possible. She also mentioned yesterday's workshop, and for anybody interested, I think it's absolutely worth the time. It was long, but it was very robust and really made the connections between climate change work and habitat and water, and that if we are going to support fish and wildlife, we need habitat and water. And the positions in these POPs for the Habitat Division really do undergird that. I think that it would be useful for this commission to consider moving the Habitat Division POPs up in our priority list. We don't have to make a decision on it today because we're going to have this again in July. We will look at it in July, but I think that it would be worth considering showing our support for this as priority work by moving those up and making, for instance, 112, which reestablishes the Habitat Division and provides significant effort for water analyses, and some of those others, we should move those up and demonstrate that this is the priority. And I'm not tone deaf. I do recognize the general fund concerns with COVID. I think though that if we put these at the top, we're showing our priority for it, and we'll know a lot more by July when we have to make a decision. But this work is critical. The department is doing a terrific job, I think, of interconnecting the fish work, the wildlife work, and the habitat work now. And the climate change and ocean change policy really crystallizes how that will happen. I also think that one other thing about the Habitat Division is that across the state, one of the key things will be the natural resource agencies really working together, and the climate change policy that you'll hear in July and this habitat work makes those connections with the other agencies and makes that work more possible, I think. And it's an important role for fish and wildlife if we're going to also have habitat to be able to be at those tables effectively. And I think these POPs would let us begin to do that. So strong support. Just to summarize where we are right now, from Commissioner Labhart, there was an interest in talking about OCRF and how that connects with our continuation POPs and the other work that's being proposed. Commissioner Zarnowitz talked about it's still possible maybe to create the Habitat Division regardless of the POPs. And a question about POP 119 And then the question about the Western Oregon stream positions and if they're in the reduction options as well as the POPs. So I think those are the ones I've heard so far. Great comments and questions so far. And it looks like we have one more hand up from a commissioner. So Commissioner Woolley. There we go.
Okay, move. Okay, I'm on. Okay, just sorry, a little bit of off and on there. Just a follow up to Commissioner Zarnowitz's earlier comment, and maybe this is a question for Director Melcher. So in negotiation, if we go to negotiation, if we're told that we have partial funding for the Habitat Division, what would you want to prioritize? I mean, obviously the division needs an administrator, but I'm just thinking, you know, if we have part of our positions funded, not others, I mean, geographically, what do you feel is most important? And just administratively, with establishing and operating the new division, where would the negotiations fall in priorities?
Thank you, Chair Wall and Commissioner Woolley. I think certainly you're correct. It would be very difficult to have a new division without a division administrator. So I think that would be our priority, because as Commissioner Zarnowitz pointed out, there are many pieces of the division already in place, already funded. So the division administrator would be, at least in my mind, the highest priority to get things started. I would also say, though, that you know, the process here is that we will submit the agency request budget that the commission approves. We will submit that to the governor's office. And at least in my experience, there's not a lot of negotiating with the governor's office. The next step is they tell us what the plan is. Sometimes there's some discussions, but it's not exactly a negotiation, at least not in the strict sense of the word. So, and then after it's in whatever's in the governor's budget, then it goes to the legislature and it becomes our budget, and we advocate for the governor's recommended budget through the legislative budget process. So.
Okay, thank you, Director Melcher. And then just a closing comment from me. You know, as we know, we've talked about for years how to fund protection of wildlife that aren't hunted or fished. And Commissioner Labhart's talked about, you know, potential national legislation. That's, as you said, Commissioner, that's been a very iterative process, and you know, we don't know if and when that funding will arrive. I think we're all optimistic and feeling positive about it. And so that's all the more reason to establish this Habitat Division, because we can do something right here in Oregon. We can create our Habitat Division and fund, you know, put the money where we've only had a mandate, you know, for years, you know, with our conservation strategy, and not the funding and not the positions to make that happen. So this is the time to get that going. So I wholeheartedly support it, appreciate all the work that's gone into it, and I'm ready to move forward.
And Chair Wall, if I might, thanks, Commissioner Woolley. I know that there are, I just don't want to make sure we don't forget, there are some folks signed up and in the waiting area for testimony. So I just want to make sure we hadn't forgotten that.
Thank you. I haven't. And I think just so people who are waiting will know, I think what we will do is finish the questions and comments, and it looks like we're getting close to that point. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and start the testimony right away. I believe there are about 8 people signed up for testimony. So Commissioner Zarnowitz.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, provide some information from the past. The Habitat Division, as a consolidated entity in the department, was able to take a lot of pressure off of the Fish and Wildlife divisions by focusing discussions with a lot of other agencies to get ODFW's priorities for habitat protection and population protections even through other agencies' actions to get that into their work. And because the Habitat Division only had field staff in a very short amount of time, and then those got cut during the budget cut, the Habitat Division provided a lot of support for field staff. The field staff did do the work. Fish and wildlife biologists did do the work in the field for the Habitat Division, and they always wanted to have habitat staff out there too, to take some of the workload off of them. And that's part of what the division or the agency has put together, is that there are now going to be those assistant biologists or watershed biologists to help take that pressure off of the fish and wildlife biologists, so they could focus on doing the work that they need to do to protect fish and wildlife species. So that's kind of how the habitat functioned in the past, and how it certainly can function given these positions that are proposed. Thanks.
Thank you. It's great to have the history that you have with these for these discussions. Are there any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Then let's take a 10-minute break and come back at, actually, let's make it 13 minutes and come back at 10:20. Thank you. And we'll start testimony when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. Just before we call the first person who would like to testify, I'd like to mention something about public participation. Michelle Tate with the department and others have done significant work over the last weeks and even last months to try to make this as smooth as possible. It's never going to be perfect, but they have done great work so far. That said, if there are people in participating in the testimony or just listening to us, if there is feedback, we'd be happy to hear it. The commission and the department are interested in getting public participation right. It looks like we will be virtual, at least for the July meeting, probably the August meeting. We're all looking to see when we can get back to in-person meetings, but it's not going to be in the next 10 minutes. So we would appreciate any feedback you have about public participation. And in the meantime, welcome today. And our first person is David Moskowitz, and then Bob Salinger, and then Jennifer Fairbrother. So if we could bring those three in, Kristen.
Okay, we'll do that.
And if you can hear me, David, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start. And we are timing things, so all of the people who are speaking know that we are timing it. So we will hope that you will keep your comments to the 3 minutes. That's our usual practice.
Okay, can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, so go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Chair Wall, members of the commission, Director Melcher, my name is David Moskowitz. I'm with the Conservation Angler. We're a wild fish conservation organization in the North Basin, in the Northwest. And we appreciate the opportunity to work with the department staff and the commission on developing the budget. And as Director Melcher has outlined, it's a long process, and we hope to be able to participate and support many of the department's initiatives. And I've submitted written testimony. I'm just going to highlight a few things to urge that we get to work on with you over the coming year or more, actually, that this budget is developed and put into place for the department. I'll start at the top with our highest priority, and that is supporting the creation of the Habitat Division. It's important to note that many of these positions are already funded in the department. It would really be great to see this expanded, and also so that it creates, as people have said, the third leg of the stool. And we are prepared, our organization is budgeting time and resources to support the creation of that through the coming year and the budget process with the legislature. I almost think that's probably almost the most important piece. I'll touch on a couple of fish-related issues. There is a POP to increase what's called salmon forage for endangered orca, and our organization is opposed to that request. We feel it's not been sufficiently analyzed for effectiveness. It causes issues with existing ESA-listed Chinook salmon in the Willamette Basin. We believe it's sort of a Trojan horse of sorts, and we will not be supporting that and probably actively trying to make sure that doesn't happen. In terms of reintroduction, there's two important elements of reintroduction that are in the budget, affected by the budget. One is in Klamath, and we believe the existing agency administrative rules for natural recolonization need to be the priority there. We do support the ongoing biologist position there because that effort of general reintroduction of salmon is really important. At Wallowa Lake, Oregon has spent a lot of public funds to make that dam there safe. And we believe that it's time for the dam owners and the people who benefit from that dam to really step up in terms of providing passage for sockeye. We're not opposed to reintroduction of sockeye there, but Since it's a trap and haul proposal, we think there's very little scientific evidence that that's an effective way to reestablish salmon. And until we move to a more volitional passage strategy, we think that's going to be a waste of money and not a proper use of general fund dollars for that. We support a couple of legislative pieces. One is to change the timeline in the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund to ensure that to ensure success for that package. So we support that. However, we do not support the elimination of the sunset of the Columbia River endorsement fee sunset, which is proposed to expire in 2022 or 2020, I guess, or no, 2022. But that we don't support that as it currently is being spent and is structured.
Dave, if you can kind of wrap up that.
All right. Thank you. I'll reiterate that we totally support the Habitat Division, and we're going to spend a lot of time ourselves to support that. I have a question on or maybe a statement on process. We have public testimony scheduled for this budget right now, and yet it's likely to change, perhaps due to special session work, perhaps due to commission and staff work that happens. So we're hoping that in July, there's also public testimony opportunity before the commission approves the final budget. We think that's important because there's going to be a lot that's learned today and there'll be changes in the future. So we hope that you'll allow the public to comment on that at that time. And I really appreciate it. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, are there, I see there is a question from Commissioner Woolley.
Just a quick comment, Dave. I just wanted to express some appreciation for that extensive bibliography of research that you provided with your written testimony. There's a lot of concern with comments that there's not enough science to back the proposal, that's currently on the table. So I think that's helpful. I estimated around 150 citations that were listed, research that's been done. Obviously, those citations don't include abstracts or conclusions of the research. They'd have to be looked at a little more closely, but I think that's important that everyone knows that research exists. So just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you. Any other commissioners with questions? Thank you, Commissioner Woolley and Mr. Moskowitz, and we'll go to Bob Salinger.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So good morning, Chair Wall and members of the ODF&W Commission. My name is Bob Salinger. I'm the Conservation Director for the Portland Audubon Society. I would note first off that reprioritizing the ODF&W budget is a top priority for Audubon chapters across the state of Oregon. There are 11 of them across the state of Oregon, and realigning things in a way that best serves all of the fish and wildlife species under ODF&W's purview is a top priority for us, and making sure that the structures that are in place allow for solid management of both game and non-game wildlife. We appreciate all the work that's gone into this budget and being part of the Budget Advisory Committee. We are very, very supportive of reestablishing the Habitat Division at ODF&W, as Dave's already noted, is the third leg of the stool. It's actually kind of amazing to think that a state fish and wildlife agency doesn't have a Habitat Division right now. So this really restores something that's absolutely essential. We support all of the elements of reestablishing all of the POPs that are in the proposed budget to reestablish the Habitat Division. We see it as a core element of any holistic approach to conservation in the state of Oregon when it comes to fish and wildlife. And it's all the more important, as has already been noted, in an age of climate change, and also to meet the governor's water vision as well. So the time is really right for it. And it's the essential platform off of which everything else operates, really, from our perspective. We would flag two concerns. One is that it's not actually big enough. that it's dwarfed by the other divisions as it stands and as it's proposed. So we think it could actually be more robust over time, but we obviously understand the challenges that we're all facing in terms of budget this year, but we see it as a platform to build off of. The second concern I'll just flag is that it's important that the fish and wildlife divisions remain focused on game and non-game as well, that this shouldn't shift all of the non-game stuff into the habitat division and leave those other two divisions simply to focus on game species. So making sure that we holistically approach things across the board. But we see this as a really important step, and we're very, very supportive. We're also supportive of the suggestion of Chair Wall to move it up the priority list. I want to very briefly raise a few concerns about the proposed cuts. I understand that those are just being proposed at this point, that they are not moving forward, and there's a long way to go on that. But I want to flag a couple of things because those cuts, in our opinion, would be devastating as proposed. 4 things I'll flag there. 1, removing funding for marine reserve science and planning. This is the next generation of wildlife refuges in the state of Oregon, absolutely critical to protecting our marine species. The legislature is going to be revisiting it in 2023. So this is exactly the time where we need ODF&W ramping up, not ramping down on marine reserves. So that's a real concern to see that in there. Pulling back from the nearshore strategy is also a huge concern. Some of our most challenging wildlife issues are along the nearshore, and it's critical that ODF&W maintain a strong presence there and build, not retract. There's proposed cuts that would pull ODF&W out of marine development at a time when we're probably going to see an expansion of proposals to develop energy off the coast of Oregon. And finally, there's pulling back on anti-poaching funding. The legislature just approved a really nice package on anti-poaching. It's something a lot of groups have been working on for a long time. We'd hate to see that go backwards again. So just want to flag those 4 things because we feel those would be really devastating cuts if they did come forward. So again, very supportive of the Habitat Division, and thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you, Bob. Commissioners, questions of Bob Salinger? Thank you, Bob. And Kristen, could the 3 after, Jennifer Fairbrother is next, but could you bring in Al Elkins, Danielle Mosier, and Kirk Blaine, sorry, so that they could be ready after Jennifer. So thank you very much, Bob. And Jennifer Fairbrother.
Just checking to make sure that you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Chair Wall and members of the commission, my name is Jennifer Fairbrother, and I'm the Conservation Director with the Native Fish Society. I want to just, like many folks before me, reiterate my support and the support of Native Fish Society for reestablishing the Habitat Division. It's going to enable the department to apply resources that are necessary to address the challenges of climate change, water quantity and quality, and land use development and modification. We know that wild fish are incredibly resilient and that healthy habitats that support the diversity of life histories are a critical component of reviving abundant wild fish. In regards to deferred maintenance, we urge the department to undertake a thoughtful approach to right-size infrastructure and reduce the backlog of deferred maintenance. Safe and comfortable working conditions are certainly necessary, and deficiencies are deserving of attention. However, we have not seen the agency meaningfully consider right-sizing the state's existing infrastructure, particularly the extensive and aging hatchery production system. It's time to thoughtfully put a stop to the endless revolving door of general fund bonding that doesn't address or diminish the problem over the long term by divesting the state of harmful hatchery infrastructure with a focus on the worst offenders, those having direct negative impacts on Endangered Species Act listed fish and those that degrade water quality. Finally, addressing the proposed additional hatchery production for southern resident killer whales, POP 121. In the 50 years preceding the listing of orcas as an endangered species, the states of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho released a combined 20 billion hatchery Chinook salmon. Since listing in 2005, these states have released more than 6.5 billion hatchery Chinook salmon, yet orca numbers continue to decline. We can't pretend a Band-Aid solution of releasing an additional 2 million hatchery Chinook salmon each year, which represents a mere 0.7% increase in total releases in the Pacific Northwest, is going to solve this problem. Saving orcas is fundamentally dependent on reviving abundant wild fish. We need immediate action to remove dams to create volitional fish passage. We need to increase the resiliency of our rivers in the face of climate change by fixing habitat, protecting in-stream flows, and providing cold water refugia. And we need to reform open ocean mixed stock fisheries and hatchery production. We need to revive abundant wild fish, and this objective must be at the heart of the agency's budgetary decisions. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you for staying within your time. That's terrific. Commissioners, questions? Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it. Great testimony. Then can we move to Al Elkins?
So Al, you'll need to unmute yourself and start your video by clicking on the mute and start video icon in the bottom left hand of your screen.
There I go. How's that?
Perfect. And if you could start your video as well.
How do I do that?
There should be a start video icon at the bottom left hand of your screen next to your mute.
There
Perfect.
I am.
There
There's
you
the top of my head.
Great. Thank you.
For the record, I am Chair Wall, Director Melcher, members of the Fish and Wildlife Commission. For the record, I am Al Elkins, representing the Oregon Hunters Association. I am here today to share some comments on the department's proposed budget. First of all, we would like to commend Erica Kleiner, Brandy Nichols, Shannon Hearn, and Director Melcher for a job very well done under these uncertain circumstances. OHA is glad to see the department is continuing to provide funding for overtime work to the patrolling of mule deer winter ranges. Thank you for that. In relation to the POP on the Habitat Division realignment and new funding requests, the OHA is opposed to the establishment and of the Wildlife Division and to all the intricacies of this POP. Our priorities for funding or funding requests is twofold. Monies to support field biologists and monies to support law enforcement of our wildlife laws. With the current pandemic atmosphere and potential staff reductions, the fact that we are losing enforcement officers daily and the potential of losing our anti-poaching monies, OHA feels that the agency should go to preserving department monies that support field biologists and those that enforce our wildlife laws to help maintain and protect two of our most valuable resources, Oregon's wildlife and habitat. Obviously, the hardest part of this entire building a budget cycle during this pandemic is knowing what to expect for available general funds and lottery funds in the next budget cycle. I imagine that this proposed budget will look entirely different by the time it reaches Ways and Means Subcommittee next year. And we will have more discussions on what the agency's priorities should be and where their funding should be. That concludes my testimony. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for putting up with our virtual platform here. It looks like you have a question from Commissioner Labhart.
Yes, thank you. Alan, I'm curious, the potential loss of anti-poaching money, that's the first I've heard about that. What have you heard that we haven't heard?
Well, my concern and OHA's concern is that the monies that went into that campaign or that are in campaign are general fund monies. And there is as you know, a crisis in general funding. And so we are concerned that that will be a potential cut for the agency. And we worked long and hard in establishing that campaign, and we are really concerned about losing that campaign. And we are in fact losing OSP enforcement officers on a daily basis right now. And that's a concern of ours too. So the combination of those two is something that I don't think the agency or OSP wants to have to face.
So Director Meltzer, have you heard that?
Well, Chair Wall and Commissioner Labhart, I think, you know, I don't have any inside track on what the Legislative Fiscal Office is thinking for future reductions, either in this biennium or in the current or in the future biennia. I think any general fund program is certainly at risk, and I think that's what Al is expressing. Of course, in the governor's request of agencies for general fund cuts, the governor can only do proportional allotment reductions. And so all the agency can do is proportional allotment reductions. So we did, of course, submit some small reduction to the anti-poaching campaign, but that I think was covered with vacancy savings because we didn't fill the positions right away.
Okay, thank you.
Other commissioners have questions of Mr. Elkins? If not, thank you, Al, and we'll go to Danielle Mosier.
Hi, everyone. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Woolley, and members of the commission. My name is Danielle Moser. I'm the Wildlife Program Coordinator for Oregon Wild. Thanks for being on this marathon of a commission hearing today. We do appreciate it and appreciate being able to provide public testimony. So I'm going to get right into it. You know, we support the reestablishment of the Habitat Division. We think it's a critical step forward. And it's a good baseline. What's being proposed, of course, as others have said, there's always room to expand it, to make it more robust and comprehensive. But we think as of now, this is a good step forward and really important to just bringing back and having this coordination within the agency. You know, it's important that we do have a lens to be able to look at things through, you know, an ecosystem-wide, landscape-wide, habitat-wide framework. And, you know, even as it was stated by ODFW in their POP proposal, ODFW currently lacks proactive, focused, and consistent efforts to restore, protect, and enhance habitat for Oregon's fish and wildlife. So, you know, with habitat loss, degradation, fragmentation continuing and becoming more pressing issues, it's just vitally important ODFW has the tools, has the resources to be able to address this. You know, we also hope it gives better clarity for ODFW as there is this cross coordination across divisions, you know, where there might be gaps in their conservation work so that they can work toward filling those in the future. And, you know, another reason we think the Habitat Division is quite vital is, again, to be able to effectively weigh in with other land managing agencies, other proposals externally facing, such as like wind energy siting projects and other things that to be able to better coordinate and strategize. And of course, as climate change and its impact on wildlife, water, and forest worsens, loss of biodiversity, it's just critical that our natural resources agencies are prepared and have the tools and the strategic plans in place to address that. And we think the Habitat Division is just going to be critical. You know, obviously you all have to look through a lot of the different budget things before you. You know, I want to propose a lens by which perhaps to look at the potential reductions and, you know, deciding what gets funded. So under existing statute, ODFW's work is guided by the Oregon Wildlife Policy, which states that it is the policy of Oregon that wildlife shall be managed to prevent serious depletion of any indigenous species and to provide the optimum recreational and aesthetic benefits, which most of you know. However, 20 years ago, the Oregon Attorney General's Office issued an opinion further clarifying this to say that it's in fact the commission's and the department's overriding obligation to manage and prevent the serious depletion of any indigenous species. So simply put, we cannot provide optimal recreational opportunity if we haven't prevented the serious decline of our native fish and wildlife. So I want to propose that lens as you look through all of the potential reductions to think about conservation as the main foundation, because if we don't conserve the species, we can't use them for recreation and to optimize that opportunity. So thank you, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Danielle. Commissioners, are there questions, comments? I don't see any, Danielle, so thank you very much. Kristen, can we go to Kirk Blaine then? And after that, could you bring in Ann Velisis and Brian Pozowitz?
Yes, they're
They're waiting. Terrific. Kirk?
Hello, thank you, Chair Wall and Commissioners and Director Melcher for having me today and allowing me to speak. I'm here on behalf of the Steamboaters, a nonprofit conservation organization on the North Umpqua River, based close to Roseburg. I'm speaking on behalf of Policy Option Package 112, Habitat Division establishment. We believe and we support this wholeheartedly. Ensuring this division is in place is critical for aquatic habitats for all fish and all wild fish and other important species to flourish. So we wholeheartedly support that division. Another reason that we support this is in the light of climate change. We're constantly seeing lower flows, higher temperatures of our waters, making it more difficult for those fish to flourish. So we, like you have all been discussing over the past few days, we really support you in establishing this. And like everyone else has been reiterating earlier today, we really would like to see that move forward and again, support the Habitat Division establishment. So thank you all. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. A lot of the words that have already been shared that I support. So that's all for me today.
Terrific. Let me just check. Commissioners, questions? I don't see any, Kirk. So thank you very much and for your short and sweetness of testimony. So let's go to Ann Velisis next. Go ahead, Ann.
Good morning, Commissioners and Director Melcher and Chair Wall. My name is Ann Velisis, and I'm testifying today on behalf of the Kalmiopsis Audubon Society. Our group has more than 400 members on the South Coast in Curry County who care deeply about birds, fish, and wildlife. I'm here to voice strong support for reestablishing the ODFW Habitat Division through Policy Option Package 112 and support the POPs that support that as well, 113 through 117. And would also like to support Chair Wall's suggestion to boost its priority. I really appreciate your discussion this morning, and I regret to say that I was not aware of earlier opportunities to provide input on this topic, so there may be other constituents in that vote too, and really appreciate the chance to voice our strong support this morning. As others have already said, I'll just say briefly, given the many challenges now looming, economic, but especially considering projections for climate change impacts to our rivers, forests, wetlands, and marine environments, we think it's critically important for ODFW to adopt forward-thinking approaches that go beyond reactive single species management and to develop and implement proactive, cost-effective strategies that can have broader positive outcomes for many species at once. Although habitat is fundamental to ODFW's very mission to protect and enhance Oregon's fish, wildlife, and their habitats, the agency currently lacks staff that can work in a proactive, focused way to pull this off and make this happen. Although staff may be very knowledgeable about gaps in habitat, in our experience, there's been limited capacity to develop projects and partnerships needed to close those gaps. Meanwhile, habitat loss, fragmentation, and degradation continue to be significant factors in limiting recovery of fish and wildlife, which is what we all would like to see. We hope that the Habitat Division will be able to address these shortcomings in ODFW's current conservation work. But in addition, ODFW needs a Habitat Division so it can show strong leadership to address the growing impacts of climate change. Identifying and working to shore up critical habitats, secure in-stream flows, establish thermal refugia, restore off-channel habitat and wetlands, improve water quality and quantity, and develop those partnerships to accomplish other needed enhancements are all essential work if we want to conserve birds, fish, and wildlife into the future. By devoting more dedicated and strategic resources to habitat conservation, ODFW will be able to better serve current hunters and fishermen, but also a broader constituency of Oregonians who cherish watching and observing wildlife. It will also help the agency to better provide for use and enjoyment of wildlife by future generations, another fundamental tenet of the agency's mission. So for all these reasons, we strongly support and urge you to reestablish the Habitat Division. We thank you for considering our view and for your public service on behalf of us all.
Thank you, Anne. Commissioners, are there questions? I did want to refer back to one of the comments you made, Anne, and just check in. I think that when earlier people who testified mentioned other comment stuff, it was the External Budget Advisory Committee, and that was online this time instead of in person, and people may have been referring to that.
Okay, I just mentioned it because some of the commissioners mentioned that there was concern about it, and so thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. So no more questions. Appreciate it, Anne. And then we'll go to Brian Posowitz.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. Chair Wall, members of the Commission, Director Melcher, my name is Brian Posowitz. I am here today on behalf of an organization called Humane Voters Oregon. We're a nonprofit organization that works to promote improved animal welfare in Oregon through participation in Oregon's governmental process and elections. I am also here on behalf of our organization to support reestablishment of the Habitat Division. Our members and supporters tend to be people who value Oregon's fish and wildlife for its own sake, just being able to see them and just knowing they exist, and not so much through hunting and fishing. We think reestablishment of the Habitat Division would help recognize and further that legitimate interest in management of the state's fish and wildlife. As I think you've seen, only about 12% of Oregon's population fishes, only about 7% hunt. I suspect those are a lot of the same people in those two percentages. And clearly the department's obligation to manage the fish and wildlife as a trustee for all Oregonians extends beyond just people who hunt and fish and beyond just species that are hunted and fished. And so the Habitat Division, we think, would really help recognize that role. We also think the Habitat Division can play an important role in helping the department represent fish and wildlife interests before other agencies in their regulatory proceedings. And we think we know the department does that to a large extent. We think this would help facilitate that. And we think that's really important to carrying out the department's mission. We recognize the extraordinary financial conditions, but think this is a really high priority. And as has been noted, the division would consist largely of existing positions realigned. We do have a concern, and Bob Salinger, I think, sort of beat me to it, but the proposed Habitat Division would be only about 5% of the agency's total budget. And that includes the realignment of existing positions. I think given the importance of habitat in the agency's mission as it's expressed and written on the walls of the commission meeting room, that habitat needs to be more than 5%, have more than 5% importance. So I think one of two things need to happen. One, the Habitat Division needs to be a lot bigger, or two, it needs to be made clear that the remaining divisions, fish and wildlife, that even though we have this Habitat Division, if it does get established, that habitat is still part of their responsibility. Thank you very much for considering my comments.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much for your testimony. That's the end of our list of people who are going to testify. I did want to reiterate, though, for anybody who is interested in watching the tape from the workshop yesterday, and I say that because it was titled Climate and Ocean Change Policy, and it was about that policy, but it really was, as one of the speakers during it said, an attempt to show that this work is mission difficult, very difficult, but not impossible. It really made the centrality of habitat work and how the department is looking at it clear. it talked about how the department is integrating that work and gave some really practical examples of how that is playing out in the department. So I think it's worth people looking at. It's very related to this habitat discussion as well. So commissioners, I think that's it because that's it on the testimony. We could go back to any further questions that you have of staff, or we can conclude the work there on this item. Director Melcher, any last comments on the budget before we move off of this one?
No, I appreciate the feedback, and we'll look forward to talking with you on this subject again in July.
Thank you. So let's go to our next item on the agenda, which is the Access and Habitat project funding, and if Travis Schultz is available.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just getting my presentation up now.
Okay.
Chair Wall, this is Mark. I noticed that we do have a draft motion for the budget. Was that not where we postponed that, or?
Postpone it. I just missed it, and I will work my way back to it while Travis is talking, and we'll come back to it, Commissioner Lappard.
Can everybody see the first slide up there?
Yes.
Okay, all good. Good morning, Chair Wall, members of the commission, Director Melcher. For the record, I am Travis Schultz, Access and Habitat Program Coordinator. In my presentation today, I will provide an informational on the Oregon Open Fields Program. I have 5 A&H Board recommended projects for review and the appointment of 2 hunter representatives to the A&H Board. The 2018 Farm Bill renewed the Voluntary Public Access and Habitat Incentive Program to provide funding to help state and tribal governments encourage landowners to allow public access to their lands for hunting, fishing, and other wildlife-dependent recreation, which in Oregon funds the Open Fields Program. Projects may be up to 3 years in duration. The grant is centered on access, so all projects must include an access component. The maximum single award to a state is $3 million. Up to 25% of that funding may be utilized by each state to award. Awards may be utilized to provide incentives to habitat improvement projects for lands that are enrolled in a public access program. All states must attempt to enroll lands that are enrolled within an NRCS wetland reserve program. The department applied for and was awarded a grant from the NRCS for a total of roughly $2.8 million, which represents an increase of about $900,000 above the last grant amount. We identified several goals for the Oregon Open Fields project. First, maintain the access areas that were enrolled in previous grants, roughly 454,000 acres. Second, add approximately 170,000 acres of new access areas. Accomplish a minimum of 3,400 acres of habitat improvement, and maintain the 2 seasonal employees for the Columbia Basin and Willamette Valley projects. Moving on, the first before the commission today is the 5 A&H recommended projects. The projects were approved by the A&H board at either the January 14th meeting in Salem or the April 7th teleconference meeting. This map shows the location of all 5 A&H board recommended projects. The Weyerhaeuser access area in green near Newport, the Aspen Valley Ranch Habitat Project east of Bend in orange and in the inset map, the North Coast Travel Management Area in blue, the Lynn County Forest Deputy in yellow, and the Willamette Private Lands Enforcement Project is in red across 7 counties. The first project up is the Willamette Private Lands Enforcement Project. This is a continuation of a project started in 1995. The project will provide law enforcement via Oregon State Police troopers to landowners who allow hunter access to their lands. OSP discontinued the retired trooper program, and so for the 2020-21 hunting season, OSP will provide enforcement via their regular duty troopers. Alternatives for future law enforcement for the project are being investigated. The project utilizes roughly $75,000 in A&H funds, which calculates to roughly 16 cents per acre of public land access. The project includes approximately 472,000 acres of large industrial private forest land and over 2.9 million acres of public land. These timberlands provide an area where many of Oregon hunters want to go, near where most of them live. The project was unanimously approved by both the A&H Regional Council and A&H State Board, with strong district wildlife support for the project. The next project before the board is the Weyerhaeuser Access Project. This project will provide public access to approximately 92,000 acres of privately owned commercial timberlands for a period of 5 years. The project will utilize $414,000 in A&H funds, roughly $83,000 a year, which calculates to 90 cents per acre per year. Weyerhaeuser historically provided no access to these lands until the close of fire season, as declared by the Oregon Department of Forestry. Under this agreement, motorized access will be allowed during industrial fire precautions levels 1 and 2, walk-in access during level 3, and then closed to all public access during level 4. This change will likely benefit archers, bear, cougar, and upland game bird hunters. The project passed both the Regional Council and State A&H Board unanimously. This is a map of the Weyerhaeuser access area lands shown in purple, and shows how they interconnect with BLM lands in yellow and Hancock lands in olive, which is, if you can see my pointed up the arrow through here. So that's what I'm calling olive. The Weyerhaeuser Access Project will provide consistent rules and timing of recreational access with the Hancock Access Project. Consistent rules and opening dates will reduce confusion from our user groups. This access area is also largely within the Stop Mountain North LC travel management area, which we do produce a map for, and will have cleaner colors than this particular one here. The next project before the board is the North Coast Travel Management Area project, which has existed in various forms since 1997. This project maintains public access to private and public timberlands during the big game hunting seasons by funding TMA enforcement. The project provides access to over 473,000 acres of private land, 1.2 million acres in total, in close proximity to the major urban centers of the state. $191,000 in A&H funds are used for the project, which calculates to roughly 40 cents per acre of private land per year. The A&H funding proposal is for the first year only of the project, which was approved for 5 years. As I mentioned earlier, the Oregon State Police is discontinuing the retired trooper program and will utilize regular duty troopers for enforcement of this upcoming hunting season. And we will continue investigating a replacement to that program. The Regional Council approved the project with one council member abstaining because they are a member of one of the cooperators for the TMA. The A&H board approved the project unanimously. The project has strong district support as well. This map shows the north portion of the North Coast TMA. Excuse me. This map shows the north portion of the North Coast TMA, showing the cooperators within the TMA. Hunter use on cooperator lands is estimated to be over 37% of the 100 days in the Saddle Mountain, Scappoose, and Wilson and Trask units. The maps shown here and in the next slide are available for download from our website as a georeferenced PDF, allowing users to use the map on their phone or some GPS units to show their location on the map. This map shows the south part of the North Coast TMA, showing cooperators within the TMA. Increased law enforcement presence and associated TMA rules have allowed landowners to address the issues they face when opening their lands to the public. Reactions by both cooperating landowners and recreationalists have been overwhelmingly positive. The next project before the board is the Lynn County Protective Association Forest Deputy Program. It is a continuation of a project started in 1997. This project will provide law enforcement funding for a sheriff deputy patrol private timberlands. The project provides approximately 398,000 acres of private forest land and an additional 121,000 acres of public land. A&H requested funds total $120,000, $24,000 a year for 5 years, which calculates to a cost of 6 cents per acre of private land each year. The forest deputy is a full-time position with the Lynn County Sheriff's Office. The A&H funds will cover approximately 11% of the deputy's salary and benefits cost. Approximately 66% will come from the LFPA, the fund, and the remaining 23% of the deputy's cost is funded by the Sheriff's Office. The program is very successful in keeping forest lands in Lynn County open to hunters during Oregon's general deer and elk rifle seasons. The year-round law enforcement presence has greatly reduced the amount of illegal activity on cooperator lands. The Regional Council and State A&H Board approved the project unanimously, and the project has strong district support as well. The final project before the board today is the Aspen Valley Ranch Habitat Project. This project is a continuation of a series of habitat projects started in 2010 to improve habitat for mule deer while providing hunting by permission access. This is a habitat project with an access component. A&H funds total $143,000 of open fields funding, so the federal funding source. The cost per acre for the habitat work averages $58 an acre. Aspen Valley Ranch is located within the department's Mallory, South Ochoco, West Sylvies Mule Deer Initiative area. This program is using state, federal, and private funds to remove juniper on parts of Aspen Valley Ranch, as well as the surrounding lands, and will continue these efforts into the future. The Regional Council approved the project unanimously. The A&H board vote was 5 yes, 1 no. The board member who voted no was concerned about the total amount of funding that has been spent on this land over the last 8 years from a variety of cooperators. This map shows the Aspen Valley Ranch project area. The project proposes to cut approximately 1,200 acres of juniper, with 800 of those acres being funded by the A&H Open Fields funds. This is done to improve winter range condition and restore hydrologic function. Treat 550 acres of weeds, primarily thistle and knapweed, to control the spread of invasive plants and reduced impacts to native plant species. Utilize prescribed fire to treat approximately 700 acres of past juniper cuttings to reduce fire danger and improve big game habitat. Allow up to 110 hunters, which calculates to 330 hunter days annually, to hunt on the property with by permission access for 3 years. All payments will be made for habitat work that is completed. The access is in addition to the habitat work and is essentially free. There's not an additional charge for the hunter's access. It is. Staff recommends funding the 5 projects the A&H board has approved. Chair Wall, this ends the presentation on issue 1, A&H approved projects. At your discretion, I can end here for public testimony and commission action on these projects, or I can continue on to issue 2 appointing 2 hunter representatives to the A&H board.
Thank you, Travis. Let me just check if it looks like there aren't questions yet from the commission. And I believe, well, we do have one now. I also have not seen anybody signed up for testimony on this one. So let's take the question first from Commissioner Woolley. And then it looks like the director was about to say something as well. So Commissioner Woolley and then Director Melcher.
Okay, thank you, Chair Wall. Just to confirm, is the 25% cap on funding for habitat, is that in statute?
Commissioner Woolley, Chair Wall, the 25% cap that I mentioned for the federal funds is part of the NRCS bill as part of the 2018 Farm Bill, and that's where the 25% cap on only those federal funds. The A&H program for the funds that are derived from licensed dollars are not so limited. We don't have any limit there as far as what percentage of our funds can go to habitat. But for those federal funds, which the Aspen Valley Ranch project is going to utilize, there is a 25% cap, which this project is well below, and it still leaves a lot of room to do additional habitat as well.
So what percentage of the funding is federal and what percentage of the funding is from license?
Per biennium, we have about 2.4 million in licensed dollars, roughly, very roughly. And then for the 3 years, which is one biennium plus a year, we have 2.8 million for that can be spent over that same 3 years. So it works out probably pretty close to a 50-50 mix for the duration of the 3-year EPA HIP open fields project that we have.
Okay, so kind of the drum that I beat annually is about having habitat improvement requirements for funding, at least a percentage of projects that are approved annually, I guess is one way to look at it, have a habitat component. The majority of the projects that we fund have no habitat component at all. And so I think about particularly large companies like Weyerhaeuser, we're providing over $414,000 to them. Their annual budget net earnings in 2018 was $748 million. And so, I feel like if they're going to take our department and state funding, I think a company in that position should also be including a habitat component. I'm also aware that these large landowners have been closing access to hunters. And so, and they've been reducing opportunity. So it's a good thing that some of this access is being restored to improve access for hunting. I just feel that the kind of the basic structure of the program should be modified and having a requirement, and it can either be a percentage of funding per project, or it can be overall, and as we review these on an annual basis, that there are a percentage of projects, like 2 out of 5 or something like that, that have to have a habitat component. And so this goes back to, the review process with our committees, and it would need to be, a change in the criteria for project submission. And that's obviously not anything that we can address today, but I just want to express my sentiments about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Travis, did you have a response, or Commissioner or Director Melcher?
No, I actually just turned my camera back on so you didn't have to watch me eating my granola bar for 10 minutes there. But
okay.
No, I think we'd want to look at the statutory language, and certainly interested in other thoughts as it relates to a mandatory habitat component. I think the statute is pretty open. It's flexible, and it recognizes that we fund the projects that we get people requesting. And so it's not like we're turning down habitat related projects to favor access. We're funding, largely the projects that we get applications for. So nothing else to add other than that.
I have a question to follow up, Travis. It seems as if several of these, and this I've seen this in other arenas besides just ODF and W, with county sheriffs and troopers always having budget issues like the rest of us, that there's a trend toward a lot of these being funding for enforcement. And I'm just curious if are we ending up replacing county budgets that are dropping their sheriff funding, or when the budgets for the state troopers are cut, are we ending up funding those? Just a question.
Chair Wall, the projects that we have are specific to additional enforcement on travel management areas. So it is directing, all the previous projects utilized retired OSP troopers, and a couple of them do utilize county troopers, but they are county deputies, and they are set up specifically to address a short-term need that we have to be able to assist those landowners in regulating public access and all the issues that they go about it. A great deal of what they do actually doesn't have a lot to do with wildlife or hunting. It is all the road closure violations, the illegal dumping, illegal wood cutting, all of those things that are in trespass for those landowners. So we're not, because it's short-term, we're working with our partners on some, the Lynn County or the Lynn Forest Protective Association project. We provide a fairly small amount, 11% of that pool. The rest is all made up of private landowners, and then the county sheriff kicks in as that as well. So it's generally not replacing funds. We're not trying to move in and provide a consistent revenue stream for OSP or a sheriff's office. It is just trying to provide a dedicated enforcement for landowners out there to allow them to open up their properties.
Thank you, that's helpful. Commissioners, are you ready to vote on the projects? And if so, could I hear a motion from one of you?
Chair, well, I just wanted to just quickly add to what Travis said. There has been an ongoing problem with property encroachment and folks that come onto private property and not respecting the land and leaving trash and going through gates and fences and things like that. So I just wanted to, just for the background of other commissioners and in the public, that's been an ongoing problem, and that's what a lot of these enforcement dollars go to. So we can move forward with the vote if there aren't any other comments. Or we can combine with adding on the new committee members. Do you want to do it in two parts or one?
If you're ready to make a motion for both of them, that would be terrific.
Okay, so I haven't heard any discussion about the appointees.
Let's do this one first, and just so we can close it out. So is there a motion on these projects?
I move to approve the 5 projects recommended for funding by the Access and Habitat Board.
I would second that.
Seconded to approve the 5 projects. Is there any discussion or other questions? If not, those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. And thank you, Travis. Let's move on to the positions that need to be filled.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I will continue. Next issue before the commission is the appointment of 200 representatives to the A&H board. Each board member is appointed to a 4-year term and can be reappointed to a second term. This table shows the current A&H board members and their terms. Candace Yao's term ends at the end of June and is eligible for reappointment to the board. This map shows the location of the current board members with the chair in black, the landowner representatives in green, and hunter representative in blue. The applicants for the 200 representative appointments are in red, showing their location across the state. A total of 7 applications were received by the deadline. The commission packet included a summary of each hunter representative application, an attachment 4, and the application for each candidate as attachment 5. In first name alphabetical order, Candace Yao, she is a current A&H hunter representative on the state board. She hunts in several Western states and is an active member of several hunting organizations. Candy has done a great job for the A&H program, taking the initiative to present the A&H program to several hunting organizations at their meeting. Harry Smith, a lifelong hunter, former Air Force intelligence officer, and diplomat with the Department of State, currently runs the Mountain Company, making custom topographic maps for use by outdoor enthusiasts. James Reese, current hunter representative for the Deschutes-Klamath A&H Regional Council. He is a master hunter and a member of Oregon Hunters Association and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Louis Milani, a lifelong hunter who owned and operated a guide service in California, past member of the Safari Club International and Ducks Unlimited, holding leadership positions with both organizations while he was in California. Michael O'Casey, a lifelong hunter and current field representative for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and is a member of multiple conservation organizations. Morgan Olson is a passionate hunter. He is the current chair for the Northeast A&H Regional Council. Morgan is also the president of the Union Wallowa Oregon Hunters Association chapter and the Conservation Habitat Director for the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. William Palmer is a lifelong Oregonian and more recent inductee into hunting. He is a member of several conservation organizations. That is my presentation. I can take any questions that you may have either now or after public testimony.
I think we don't have anybody signed up for public testimony. So commissioners, are there questions? Commissioner Labhart.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I reached out to several of the groups that might have some input on these vacancies on the A&H board. They included OHA, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Oregon Farm Bureau, Oregon Cattlemen's Association, OFIC, and Oregon Wild. Most responded and some gave a recommendation. And I also reached out to staff to see if they had a recommendation, because it was clear that all the respondents and and to me personally, that all the applicants are very well qualified and appreciate I'm very appreciative of the high quality of the applications and appreciate that the groups did make some recommendations, and it made it even harder because they were not unanimous. And they've all felt that any of them that are in the application pool would be an effective member. It was clear to me, though, in talking to these folks, that Candace Yao is a very strong member of the A&H board and should be reappointed to a second term. She is a very effective member of the A&H board, as I understand, and I look for honored to meet her someday. As for the current vacancy, there was a variety of recommendations, but Morgan Olson from Cove, as well as Michael O'Casey from Bend, were the two that were highly recommended. So rather than picking one of those, maybe we could have some discussion about those. But The first choice was Morgan Olson from Cove, and the second choice from the folks that I talked to was Michael O'Casey from Band.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other commissioners, thoughts on where to go with this one?
I just wanted to thank Commissioner Labhart for doing that extra legwork and reaching out to constituents and stakeholders to get their views. I think that that's really helpful. You know, it wasn't a requirement, that's an extra a step that is really beneficial. So thank you, Commissioner.
Are one of you ready to make a nomination of the two people for these positions?
I had a comment.
Go ahead.
Put my hand up. I think I agree with Commissioner Labhart that Candace Yao is certainly appears to be a good candidate and has been very involved in the access and habitat activities. When I read all through them, I came up with three that I felt were ones with top experience, and one was Michael O'Casey, one was James Reese, and one was Harry Smith. I finally settled on Michael O'Casey. I liked his broad experience with working with the High Desert organization, as well as being having a lot of experience hunting and with hunter organizations.
Thank you. Does that help anybody get ready to do a nomination?
Bob Spelman, I guess my top two choices were Michael O'Casey and Morgan Olson when I've done limited research I did.
Well, we're starting to narrow it down, it sounds. So can I hear a nomination?
Well, I'll give it a try, and then we can see if we want to do that. Madam Chair, I would move reappointment of Candace Yao for her reappointment to her position, and based on the input that I received, Morgan Olson from Cove for the vacant position.
I would second that.
Moved and seconded to go with nomination for Candace Yao and Morgan Olson. Are there any questions or discussion? Anything else? Then those in favor of those two people being our selections.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Sounds like it's unanimous, and great appreciation to the people who applied. It's a lot of work to do these committees, and we appreciate it immensely. As Commissioner Labhart reminded me, we had a draft motion for the budget. Let's go back to that right now. What it was just to say that we were not approving the budget today, but would defer approval until the July commission meeting. So is there?
Madam Chair, I would move to review the department's 2021-23 agency request budget and defer approval until the July commission meeting.
Oh, second that.
It's been moved and seconded to review the department's agency budget request and defer approval until July. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 I've seen ayes from all of you, so we will that motion carries. Let's talk about, we have a half hour left before noon. We were going to try to close by noon with everything in the morning, which means we have one more item, which is Exhibit D. And Travis, Are commissioners okay to just keep going, finish this? We may be able to get everything finished before noon, and then we can start right at 1:30 with the staff presentation on the fur bearer. Okay. Then is it Travis or is it Don Whitaker that's going to take this one? Don Whitaker was on earlier. There's our answer.
Chair Wall, we're going to tag team it if that's okay with you.
It's okay with me. Please start. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, Chair Wall, Director Melcher, members of the commission. I'm Don Whitaker with the game program. I'm the ungulate coordinator. Can everybody see the slide and hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so hopefully we can do this within an hour. I'll be tag teaming this with Travis Schultz, who you've just heard some discussion from.
Actually, Dawn, could I just interrupt for a second? Will it take an hour?
I don't think it will, depending on how much testimony there is.
I have not seen anybody signed up for this one, but we do only have a half hour before we were planning to break at noon. Is that cutting you too short?
I don't believe so, Chair Wall. We only have 15 slides, so it's pretty short and sweet.
Okay, let's keep going then. Thank you.
All right. So just to keep it moving here, Travis and I together are going to talk about a couple of programs that rely on the auction tags and the raffle tags to generate funding for 2 programs. We're going to go through this basically by species. I'll cover 3 species: bighorn sheep, pronghorn, and Rocky Mountain goat. Then Travis will pick it up and he'll cover the programs from the deer and elk auction and raffle tags that are a big part of funding for the A&H program. So the auction and raffle tags provide a critical funding source for the department. There's 2 main programs. The one that I'm in charge of covers pronghorn, bighorn, and Rocky Mountain goat, and then the access and habitat gets funding from the deer and elk auction and raffle programs. I do want to point out a note that in the packet, when we finalized the packet that was mailed to you, the numbers for our income over the year were draft. We still had 3 auction tags that had not sold yet when we finalized that packet, and about 4 days worth of raffle sales. But the numbers we're presenting today are final after all of the auction tags have been sold and after the raffle was finalized on May 30th. I do want to report that it was a really good year for us in the auction and raffle program. Both auction tag totals and raffle tag totals were up in the raffle case somewhat considerably. In total, these 26 tags in 2020 generated just a little more than $1.1 million net income to these 2 programs. So it was a really important and significant year for our programs. So as I mentioned, I'll start with the species that I cover. The first one is bighorn sheep. And the funds from the auction and raffle tag are dedicated specifically for the management and research for bighorn sheep. Over the time frame that the auction and raffle program has been around for bighorn sheep, this was the first one in the state of Oregon. It's generated almost $3 million just from the auction. And if we add another almost $1.7 million, that's a pretty significant chunk of resources that we have available for bighorn sheep management. It's allowed us to become one of the leaders in the Western US from a research standpoint and from a restoration standpoint in our bighorn sheep program. To summarize 2020, bighorn sheep is one of the few sets of tags within the species that we have these tags where the income was actually down a little bit. But that's because last year was a record year for both our auction and raffle. This year, our auction tag sold for $160,000 at the Sheep Show in Reno. The raffle generated a little more than $107,000. As we've heard from the start, the new world that we're dealing with the pandemic and everything, We had to get a little creative. We conducted the raffle ourselves at the headquarters on May 30th. It was live stream. It was as transparent as we could make it. And we think we made a lot of people happy, regardless of what the new world challenges were. We are proposing for 2021 that we maintain both of these tags, one auction tag and one raffle tag. We will continue with our auction of the Bighorn Sheep tag with the sheep show in Reno. That's a very large, strong contingent. And all of these tags have a primary objective of generating funds for our program. So we tend to try to send those where our opportunity to get strong funding income is strong. And for sheep, the sheep show is the biggest place to go. We will continue with our raffle program for all of these tags in association with the Oregon Hunters Association at their statewide annual banquet, which I'm optimistic that that'll occur next year. For the pronghorn, again, tags are dedicated to management and research within the state of Oregon for pronghorn. The funds that have been generated from this relatively recent set of tags is provided a little more than $420,000 that is allowing us to step up our efforts for research and management. Because of these funds, we've been able to conduct some frontline research and new research for the species within the state of Oregon, looking at migration corridors, movement patterns, helping us delineate some of the important critical ranges from a habitat standpoint. We've heard a lot of discussion on habitats this morning as well. For 2020, the auction tag is right around a little bit higher than our average for the 17 years. It was sold for $16,000. Also at the sheep show in Reno. The raffle sales this year was a record year for pronghorn, just under $27,000. So in total, it's been a pretty good year for us. Again, we propose one auction tag and one raffle tag for 2021. Travis and I are currently received applications for the host organizations for these auction tags. Wildlife Division will select a host for the pronghorn auction tag by July, and then the applicants for the access and habitat tags, it'll be taken out of the pool for the applicants for the access and habitat tags. For Rocky Mountain goat, this is one of the really becoming very popular set of tags, the auction and raffle both. In the 17 years that those two tags have been around, they've already generated over $500,000 worth of income for Rocky Mountain goat research and management and restoration. Importantly, for those that have been paying attention, our opportunities we can provide in Rocky Mountain goats have been expanding a little bit, and that's partially related to the fact that we now have a pretty good source of income to do the work that we need to do for our Rocky Mountain goats. For 2020, our auction price was down slightly, but still really, really good at $40,000. Last year was a record sales price there. The raffle tag was a really big surprise. We increased, we set a record on Rocky Mountain goat raffle sales by almost $22,000 this year. It was really kind of a surprise. For Rocky Mountain goats, the same message from me is we want one auction tag and one raffle tag for 2021. Very similar to pronghorn, we'll select the host organization for that by our July 2020 meeting. At that point, I'm going to turn the reins or the discussion over to Travis. He'll talk about the access and habitat tags, and I'll be managing the slides for him, so there's no reason to switch the slide control yet.
Okay, thank you, Don. Go ahead, Travis.
Thank you, Chair Wall. The A&H Board recommends the commission allocate 10 deer and 10 elk tags to be auctioned or raffled as a fundraiser. The funds raised through the auction and raffle are dedicated to providing access and enhancing wildlife habitat. All expenditures must be recommended by the board and approved by the commission. Next slide, please. go. 2020 revenue from the raffle ticket sales is up above over $107,000 over last year and well above the 5-year average. 2020 revenue from the auction tags is also up. It is $45,000 up above last year and well over the 5-year average. It was a great year for the A&H auction and raffle sales with continued growth in revenue. However, with the pandemic halting most of the events for the host organizations, I would like to thank them for their effort to conduct the auctions in a novel and safe manner. Ensuring a successful auction was not done at the expense of their members' health. Without them, there would not have been a great year for the A&H auction and raffle sales. Next slide, please. For auction tags for the A&H program for 2021, no changes from last year's proposal. 10 tags in total, 5 elk and 5 deer. One that will be broken down into 1 combination hunt with 1 deer and 1 elk tag, 4 statewide deer tags, and 4 statewide elk tags to be auctioned off. Next slide, please. The raffle tags for 2021, again, there are no changes from 2020. 10 tags in total, 5 deer and 5 elk. And as with the auction, 1 combination hunt that will have 1 deer and 1 elk tag. The deer will be divided into 1 statewide deer hunt to be raffled off and 3 regional hunts. And elk would be 1 statewide and 3 regional hunts to be raffled as well. And next slide, please. All total, for all programs, there are 26 tags split between 13 tags for the raffle and 13 tags for the auction. The department recommends to allocate the 26 tags to the big game raffle and auction program for 2021. And last slide, please. Thank you. We can take your questions now or after public testimony.
Commissioners, I don't see any hands. Do any of you have questions? Commissioner Woolley.
Thank you, Chair Wall. First of all, congratulations, Don and Travis, on a real good year. And I know there's a lot of work involved with pulling all these creative events together. So appreciate all the partners. So we've seen a steady overall increase from the auction and raffle program since 2012. So I was just curious what you attribute that increase to. That's for Don or Travis.
Yeah, well, I'll take a quick stab. At least for my species, I think the steady increase in income is related to just an increase within the state of Oregon as well as regionally, because these tags are also available to non-residents, and interest in these hunts because they do provide special opportunity, and that special opportunity is larger hunt area. In most cases for my species, it's anywhere there's a hunt on the books for the species. Bighorn sheep, you can hunt either of our subspecies in anywhere the commission authorizes a hunt and tag, and the seasons are 4 months long. So they're a very, very unique and popular opportunity, and the interest on the time frame and the specialness of those, and sheep is once in a lifetime opportunities. So that's just a steady increasing trend in those 3 tags. And for deer and elk, Travis, you can add in here too, but I think it's that unique special opportunity, both in the area they can hunt and the time frame they can hunt, and they are in addition to any other opportunities that a hunter might have from a general season or controlled hunt opportunity.
Thank you. Anything to add, Travis?
Thank you, Commissioner Woolley, Chair Wall. I think to get directly at your question on why we're seeing an increase is especially the auction side of things. It directly tracks with how the economy is doing overall. So when people are confident and are making money, they have money to spend. It's really just simple economics for a lot of it. More recently, we're seeing more people enter the raffle. Which allows people of less means to have a chance at these hunts. So, which is promising a well, but generally speaking, it follows the economy very well.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, 2012 is, I think, kind of a landmark year for Oregon to start moving out of the recession, more dramatically. And, employment started to go up, construction, all those kinds of things. So I think people did have more money to spend. So thank you.
I have two quick questions, and then Commissioner Spellbrink has a question as well. Dawn, to yours you may have said this and I missed it, but are most of the buyers in or out of state? And are the host organizations all Oregon organizations?
Chair Wall, Commissioner, in recent years, the majority of the auction buyers, if not all of them, have been out-of-state purchasers of the auction tag for bighorn sheep. For pronghorn and Rocky Mountain goat, it's a pretty good mix of whether they're Oregon residents or out-of-state residents. So, it's a mix, and we make them available. As far as the host organizations, the sheep tag has been historically with the national organization, the Wild Sheep Foundation, because they have an event annually that has, in some years, nearly 4,000 attendees, and their network of potential buyers is very exclusively focused on sheep. And sheep are once in a lifetime in almost all of the Western, or very high profile preferred desirable species in most of the Western states where they do occur, partly because there's not that many tags relative to the other big game species. So it really makes them fairly unique. The hosts for the Rocky Mountain goat tag and the pronghorn tag are probably 3/4 of the times that we've sold that auction tag, they've been at host organizations within the state of Oregon.
Thank you. Commissioner Spellbrink.
Not really a question, just more of an observation. One is that in my opinion, it's a great program and a great funding source. And I don't know, looking at the antelope tag, I think the auction tag sold for $16,000. I don't know if anyone else has eaten antelope, but it's one of the most, I think, great table fare meats, one of my favorite meats there is. And I calculated out, it looked like it was probably somewhere around $350 a pound for the meat that came out of that antelope, or that will come from that antelope. So a little bit out of my price range, but I think it's a great program.
And Chair Wall, Commissioner Spellbrink, I will say that our pronghorn auction tag this year was sold to an Oregon resident, even though the event was in Reno. It was an Oregon resident that purchased that tag. So
hope he invites me to dinner.
Thank you both. And I believe we have no testimony, and I would be corrected by now if I were wrong on that one. So, Commissioner Woolley, you had one more comment? Could you unmute yourself?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just tagging on to Commissioner Spellbrink. So are bighorn sheep also a food species as well?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Woolley, yes, they actually are quite good. I haven't had a lot of it, but most people that are successful in bighorn sheep speak very, very well of it as a source of meat. It's a dark meat like most of our wild ungulates. It's not like domestic sheep, which oftentimes is a lighter colored meat. It's quite well.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the 2021 auction and raffle big game tag allocations?
I'm willing to make a motion. I would move to approve the 2021 auction and raffle big game tag allocations as proposed by staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded to approve the 2021 auction and raffle big game tag allocations. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Unanimous. Thank you both very much for your presentation. And unless I hear differently, I think that we are to the end of the parts that we needed to get done, get finished this morning. And we will reconvene at 1:30. Please try to be back at least a few minutes before that, because we'd like to start right at 1:30 with the fur bearer item. And to the public who is still with us and listening, thank you for your participation on this platform. So we will see everybody at 1:30. Thank you for bearing with us and staying with us.